Welcome to HatmanStrikesBack Daily Boxing News. But in this stream, we're going to be talking about a whole lot more than just boxing. We're going to open it up to whatever topic within reason. You know, there's obviously certain things we need to be careful about, or I need to be careful about on this channel with regards to the algorithms and whatnot. YouTube is a pretty censorship-heavy platform, but you know, you can see the titles in the video title, or the topics in the video title, should I say. Films, music, gaming, boxing, and other stuff. So shout out to everybody in the live chat. Let's just switch up the visuals here. Shout out to Hyro, protagonist early with a super chat. Much appreciated, my bro. So we got Team Batman Boxing in here. We got Mr. Luca. We got KS. We got Chainsaw. We got Oloyede. Is that how you pronounce the surname? We got Chaz. We got Warts. Let's just call him that. We got Crypt Talk. We got Murozman. Rich Franklin. We got Ardashir. I'm going to pronounce it like that. Stats Killer. Simon Jones. Sean Baker. The Celtic Magician. Seamus. What's up, Seamus? Ain't seen you for a while. What's good? He says he's just got done watching the Eubank Ben interview with Piers Morgan. Yeah, somebody else was asking for my thoughts on that. I haven't watched it, and I don't plan to watch it, to be honest. I can't stand Piers Morgan. And Conor Ben is pretty insufferable. Eubank Jr.'s all right, but nowhere near as entertaining as his dad as a character. So unless there's something specific that you guys want me to hear in that interview, then yeah, I've got no desire to ever watch it. Just being real. No desire to ever watch it at all. First Round Boxing says, was Candace Owens right to say that Tupac is just an actor portraying a gangster? Ironic as people say she is also. Big up Hatman. Big up First Round Boxing. Well, yeah, there was definitely an element of acting to Tupac's whole shtick. I mean, if you see that interview that he did when he was about 17, he was unbelievably effeminate. Unbelievably effeminate. And it amazed me that there was all these like Tupac fans in the comments, and whenever that interview was brought up saying, he was 17, leave him alone, he was just a kid. Bro, I remember being 17. I remember what all my friends and, you know, everybody else was like at 17, and nobody was acting like that, I can assure you. He was effeminate as hell. So Tupac was able to change his behavior and change his persona based upon the type of people he was around. And we all do that to some degree, right? Like, we don't necessarily behave the same way around our friends that we would around our parents, or, you know, if you work in a corporation or whatever, you don't necessarily behave the same way around your boss or at work as you would around your friends or family. So we all do it to some extent, but with Tupac, it was extreme. You know what I mean? Like, really extreme. In that interview, he was so effeminate. He's literally behaving like a woman. It was unbelievable. And he went from that to, like, a couple of years later, Thug Life. So he was an actor, but he was an actor who embodied the role, you know, to a pretty extreme extent. To the point where he did shoot those two guys. He didn't realize they were police, obviously, at the time. But he did shoot two guys, and he was known to do some wild stuff. So he kind of took his acting to the extreme, if that makes sense. You know how the certain actors, like even Daniel Day-Lewis, when he was on the set of Gangs of New York, he would stay in character the whole time. When Martin Scorsese would call him at his house, he would answer the phone as Bill the Butcher. When he would come onto the set, you know, in the morning, before he was even made up, he would be behaving like Bill the Butcher. He would stay in character the whole time. And some actors actually I guess you could say, develop even mental health issues. And they might even start to develop some form, perhaps a mild form, of multiple personality disorder because they immerse themselves in the characters to such an extent. And so you could see Tupac in that way, maybe. That he immersed himself in the thug life character to such an extent that he started to become that character. Which was very foolish because, he didn't grow up in gangs or anything like that. But when he started hanging around with, Suge and the Bloods and whatnot, he started hustling backwards, basically. He wanted to immerse himself in the gang culture, and that's ultimately what led to his demise. Shout out to Mr. Luca for the super chat. He says, Big Del Boy desperate for the Usyk coins. Yeah, as you would expect. I hope he doesn't get that opportunity. Nothing against Del Boy, but, there are many, many, many other fighters I'd prefer to see get an opportunity against Usyk, especially if he's only got 2 fights left. There's plenty of other people I'd rather see Usyk fight than Del Boy. Del Boy's had his opportunity. Shout out to High Noon for the super chat. He says, Hatman, will you start doing serial killer podcasts again? Yes, I may well do. The next Patreon podcast I'm doing will be with regards to the Mothman of Point Pleasant, which I've done an episode about on the past, but in this instance, I'm reading large excerpts out of the book, The Mothman Prophecies by John Keel, and giving my take on what that whole thing was really about, because it is totally bizarre. The Mothman of Point Pleasant, if any of you are familiar with it. And it wasn't just that creature itself, but a whole heap of other strange occurrences that were going on in and around Point Pleasant in 66? So yeah, that's the next episode, going in depth on that. Totally bizarre. And John Keel, the author of the Mothman Prophecies, makes a number of claims in the book. I don't know whether these claims are true, but for example, he claims that the Native Americans, for the most part, stayed away from West Virginia. Like there was something about that area, or Point Pleasant particularly, that area of West Virginia, the Native Americans didn't like before the Europeans arrived. And obviously he's trying to sell it on the idea that it was something supernatural or, something not human that was going on over there, even in the pre-colonial times. Okay, this guy says, who won Drake versus Kendrick? Really don't care. I'm not a fan of either. JR says, the Mothman stories are very interesting. Yes, they are. And all of that led up to the collapse of the Silver Bridge, which was a horrible tragedy. Many people lost their lives. And the sightings seemed to stop instantly after that incident, according to reports. The Black Caller says, did you know any of the 28s? Yes. 28s and the younger 28s. But yeah, as for serial killer podcasts, I've got a book, which I've spoken about many times before, called The Politics of Serial Murder. And it chronicles a lot of the famous serial killer instances in the United States, but also overseas. And so whenever I want to find new serial killers to talk about, I go inside that book. So definitely stay tuned for that. I will get back into the serial killer stuff. Four Fox says, hi Hatman, big fan of your content since 2016. All right, long time, big up. Loved your video about the myth of the invincible fighter. How would Mayweather have fared versus Hearns, Ray Robinson, Leonard Duran? Big up. I think out of all those guys, I would have picked him to beat Duran personally. Ray Robinson, not sure. I'd pick Hearns, or the one who I'm most confident would beat Mayweather was Tommy Hearns. I think it'd just be too big, too strong. Keep Mayweather at the end of the jab, and he just wouldn't get close because of the punching power and the reach. The Black Caller says, heard your music you posted. Did you do any collabs back in the days? Yeah, many collabs, but not with rappers you would have heard of, although you would have heard of maybe one or two of them. So if any of you are familiar with the UK battle rap scene, the UK battle rap champion for, I don't know, a couple years in a row maybe, was a guy called Tony D. And I did at least one collab with Tony D. O'Neill says, Hatman, when is your book on sale? Well, I have to write it first. So when I've actually written a book, I mean, I do have some ideas for books, and, you know, I jot things down in Word documents and whatnot. Somebody's saying that the 147-pound division has fallen. Big up Fight Sport Talk in the chat. He says, I love Usyk versus Parker. That is Bivol versus Benavidez for me. Yeah, the 147-pound division, just like any other division, there's peaks and troughs. Shout out to Danny for the super chat. And yes, indeed, if everybody can hit the like button, it'd be much appreciated. It only takes a split second of your time. You can just stick a like on it. Really helps with visibility. Chainsaw says, Hatman, was there a beef between More Fire Crew and So Solid? Not that I can remember. Not that I can remember. More Fire Crew and So Solid. No, I remember there being a beef between, like, obviously Dizzy Rascal, Wiley, and, you know, those guys in So Solid. Roll Deep and So Solid, yeah. But More Fire and So Solid? Not that I can remember. Leo says NWA or Wu-Tang Clan. Wu-Tang Clan, Wu-Tang Clan all day. Wu-Tang all day long. Shout out to Gina. Says, yeah, I've been watching since I can't remember, when I was about 9 years. I remember the Facebook group. JR says, Hatman, what about the Patterson Gilman film of Bigfoot? For its time, even movie effects weren't that good. You never know for certain, but to me, it looks like a man in a suit. To me, that's what it looks like, a man in a suit. James Madden says, can we all agree best movies ever started on my birth, 1982, and finished in 1999? Them movies, oh my God, the music was the best. Plus it was real time then, clock, not digital time. Digital made time faster. Okay, that's an interesting theory. Yeah, the 1980s and the 1990s were amazing decades for not only movies, but also film, and certainly boxing as well. Robsky says, wasn't there a movie about the Mothman prophecies? Yes, there was. And it was about them. Yeah, it wasn't an unrelated movie. It was about the actual events in Point Pleasant, 1966. It's a pretty good movie. It's not as comprehensive as the book that it's based on, as you would expect. The book gives far more detail and far more background, because there was actually loads of like paranormal and Fortean things going on, as well as the Mothman. It wasn't just the Mothman. There was all sorts of weird stuff going on in there, in Point Pleasant, in and around that area of West Virginia. Shout out to Crip Talk for the super chat. He says, what's your thoughts on chemo? I watched that show about the woman who faked brain cancer and made millions claiming she healed herself naturally. Well, obviously, I have to give you a disclaimer and say that nothing I'm about to say should be construed as medical advice. But obviously, that is a big industry. And as much as there might be charlatans like her, there are, the industry itself has a desire to diagnose people with that particular disease because they make enormous amounts of money treating it. So you have to be cognizant of that, as well as charlatans on the other side selling snake oil claiming that it treats the disease, So I trust no one really. I trust myself and I trust my body. And I'm kind of, I'm one of these people who says, look, if it's my time, it's my time. I'm not going to go down the route of all these weird treatments and stuff like that make your hair fall out and make you infertile and nauseously ill and put you in terrible pain for months and months. No, I'm not going down that kind of route ever, irrespective of what illness, I don't anticipate getting any kind of illness like that. But, hypothetically speaking, when it's my time, it's my time. I'm a robust human being, and I can get through most things. I've got a good immune system. So, yeah, there is a book which I recommend everybody read. The hard copy costs, last time I checked, somewhere in the region of £1,000. So you're probably not going to buy the hard copy. But it's an extremely controversial book written by a highly esteemed academic at the time, German academic in the field of microbiology, called Peter Duisberg. All right, Peter Duisberg. And he made himself an enemy of the scientific and the medical establishment with an extremely controversial book. He was also a friend and colleague of the late Kary Mullis, who was another kind of renegade academic. And Kary Mullis invented the PCR test. Yeah, the infamous PCR test. He invented that test. And he said certain things about it, which had he been alive from 2020, things would have been very different, right? Because I don't want to go too much into it. But anyway, Peter Duisberg wrote a controversial book. You're not going to get the hard copy unless you want to spend $1,000. But you can get the audio book version, which might cost you $10. And it not only breaks down a particular disease and his very controversial views on this particular disease, but it also gives a fascinating insight. It kind of chronicles the history of, how can I describe it now? It chronicles a history going all the way back to the late 1800s into the early 1900s of widespread medical and scientific fraud. Basically, it chronicles that from the 1800s all the way through to like the early 2000s or whenever he wrote that book. So I'm kind of almost hesitant to say the name of the book because it's so controversial. But he wrote it, I think, in the late 90s or early 2000s. Peter Duisberg. Yeah? I think he's still alive, but he's pretty old now. But that was one of the most eye-opening books I ever listened to. So obviously got the audio book. One of the most eye-opening books ever. Because that guy has all the qualifications, all the experience, and he was extremely well respected in academia and in the scientific community up until he revealed his views about a particular disease. And then he was blacklisted and they all turned against him and, so on and so forth. But yeah, Peter Duisberg, his book, just look up Peter Duisberg, controversial book. It's called Inventing the Something Virus. I won't say the name, right? But Inventing the Something Virus. Incredible book. So yeah, shout out to Crypt Talk for the super chat. BG London says, last movie you watched. The last movie I watched. What was the last movie I watched? Last movie I watched was it might have been Nosferatu, which I thought was pretty good. I spoke about that in a previous live stream. Nosferatu is pretty good. Yes, it's basically a remake of Bram Stoker's Dracula, but I thought it was a pretty decent job. I thought they did a pretty decent job with it. Gina says Soul Solid was more like a pop group. Some of their music you could say was like pop music, but a lot of it was pretty hardcore. And obviously, many of the Soul Solid members were on the roads. They're involved in some very serious stuff. Quite a lot of them. One of them, of course, Morgan, went to prison for murder. He's probably still in prison now. Mega Man, he was part of that murder case, Mega Man. And prior to that, when he was younger, he was charged with attempt on someone, and he beat that case. And there were various other, Asher D went prison, Feltham and whatnot, so, they were involved in some stuff, and there was a lot of bad stuff that happened around their gigs, Soul Solid shows in London, people ended up getting popped. Bad stuff was happening. They got basically banned from performing in London, Soul Solid, because there was so much trouble at their events. Black Dynamite says, Wu-Tang all day. I take the Lynch Mob over NWA. Yeah, I much preferred Cube's solo stuff over his. He did some good tracks, obviously, with NWA, but I preferred his solo stuff over any of NWA's music. Shout out to Same. He says, Hatman, I've been watching your videos since you had 2,000 subs on Hatman TV, I believe, from 2012. Shout out to Same. Big up. Linkage says, Back to the Future or Indiana Jones. That's a difficult pick, because I love both of those series, movie series. Back to the Future or Indiana Jones. If they would have stopped at the first 3 or 4 Indiana Jones, it would have been great, because they went on far too long. Back to the Future stopped with a trilogy. So I can't even split them, because I love both of them. I like the adventure aspect of Indiana Jones, exploring ancient history and whatnot. All right, let me actually pick one. I'm going to say Back to the Future. But I love Indiana Jones as well. The early ones. Marlo says Jay-Z or Nas. I was never really a big fan of either of them, to be honest. Never a big fan of Jay-Z or Nas. I would say Jay-Z's got more catchy songs. People think Nas is deep. I never really thought Nas was that deep. I grew up listening to people like Killer Priest and various other Wu-Tang affiliates who are really deep. But, Nas to me is like a deep rapper for people who are not deep. Do you know what I mean? I was never really a big fan of Nas. So I would probably say Jay-Z just because there's more songs of his that I find catchy and I might listen to, like from the Blueprint and some of his early stuff. But not really a big fan of either. Rep 2016 says, did you see the Piers Morgan, Eubank? No, I didn't see that. The discussion, debate, whatever you want to call it, and I have no intention of doing so. Shout out to Danny for the super chat. He says, are you excited about the afterlife, the unknowns? I wouldn't say excited, I would say intrigued. If there is an afterlife, or if it's just oblivion, who knows? We're all going to find out, right? We're all going to find out. John Nielsen says, Hatman, what's your feeling about the Triple D situation? What do you mean, the situation? What, him pulling out of the Joseph Parker fight? Well, until I see evidence to the contrary, I'm just going to take it at face value and, just say, well, maybe he was ill. People do get ill. Shakur Stevenson's opponent got ill, so maybe there was just a bug going around. It does happen. I'm obviously willing to change my mind in light of other evidence, but as it stands right now, provisionally, that's my take. He probably just got ill. And as far as not rescheduling the Parker fight, well, why would he? He was giving Parker an opportunity to fight for his title. Parker wasn't mandatory for Dubois. Dubois picked him as an opponent. So I don't really buy this notion that Dubois ducked Joseph Parker. Like, how could you duck somebody who you picked? It doesn't make sense. But yeah, shout out to Danny for the super chat with regards to the afterlife. I'm not necessarily excited. Maybe I will be when I'm old, and decrepit. But at this stage, I'm intrigued. Jaden says Frank Warren is like Palpatine. Do it. Kill him. Kill him now. Palpatine is hilarious. One of the funniest and most iconic villains ever in sci-fi was Palpatine. Revenge of the Sith was all about him, really, because those prequel films were terrible. And Palpatine was the only saving grace. In the third film in particular, like I say, he was absolutely hilarious. Joshua Hooker says, have you seen Bridget Jones Mad About the Boy? No, I haven't. I ain't seen Bridget Jones' Diary or Bridget Jones, not my kind of films. Okay, why is this chat box misbehaving already? Oh, come on, man. I'm trying to pop out the chat so I can read the comments easier, and it's not letting me do it. Let me refresh the page and see if it starts behaving. I want to pop out this chat so I can read the comments more easily, because I got them on a tiny little chat box at the moment. Okay, that's made it even worse. Now the chat box has disappeared completely. YouTube, you're killing me here. You're absolutely killing me. Or should I complain to Firefox? I'm using the Firefox browser. Oh my days. Do I have to open a new tab? Let me try opening a new tab. So I'm just refreshing the current tab. And it's, misbehaving. Let's try going this way. All right. And pop out the chat. Will this work? Yes. Success. All right, let's get that chat. Shout out to Rep for the super chat. He says, have you ever had a paranormal experience before? I've had a couple of weird experiences, but I don't know whether they were paranormal. That's the thing. I haven't had anything that I could definitely say without a shadow of a doubt was paranormal, but I've had some weird experiences. So many, many, many years ago, probably like best part of 20 years ago, I was renting a room in a flat, and basically this flat was being sublet by one of the other people that was living there, and she was this Cameroonian lady. She was horrible, like a proper horrible person, really rude and combative and everything. And there was also a Cameroonian couple that lived there. And yeah, anyway, this Cameroonian lady basically practiced witchcraft. And I had some very weird dreams and weird experiences when I was living there. But I don't know, as in, I had terrible insomnia at the time. And, that wasn't something that started when I was living there. It was something that from my teen years through much of my 20s, I suffered serious bouts of insomnia. And at one point, I was, trying to lay down on my bed when I was living in that flat. And I felt like I kept getting, God, what's it called now? Sleep paralysis, right? And I had night hag. And night hag is a well-known phenomenon that goes back centuries, where people report some type of like hag-like entity, horrible old woman that they dream is pressing down on their chest. So I had this weird sleep paralysis night hag thing where when I was falling asleep, I felt like there was something pushing down on my chest and some kind of evil entity. So yeah, that's something. If you look up night hag, you'll see a Wikipedia page about it and everything. It was reported in, I don't know, the Middle Ages and God knows when else. So I had weird sleep-related instances when I was living in that flat. Sleep paralysis, weird sensations. Like I remember going to sleep in there one time and I had the sensation that my body was, and I wasn't drinking or smoking anything or anything like that. But I was trying to go to sleep and I had the sensation that I was actually floating in the air. That I actually lifted off my bed and I was floating in the air. And then it was such a visceral sensation that I had to open my eyes. Do you know what I mean? Because it was so weird. But obviously I'm thinking that maybe the lack of sleep and the stress from work and stuff like that caused these things to happen to me. And maybe it was nothing paranormal or whatever. It was just like sleep deprivation combined with stress that led to my mind playing all kind of weird tricks on me. But yeah, that's what I would say. And I've had a few things with sleep paralysis over the years and night hag type experiences. Not for a very, very long time. The last time I had sleep paralysis was maybe, I want to say 11 years ago or something like that. And that was a weird one as well. When I had the last time I had sleep paralysis, some evil demonic voice spoke to me while I had the sleep paralysis. And anyone who's ever had sleep paralysis, the first time you have it, it can be quite a scary thing. But the last time I had it, as I say, about 11 years ago, it was some evil voice. And I was like fighting, when you're fighting in your dream to wake up, because when you go into particularly deep sleep states, my understanding is your brain can release certain chemicals that actually paralyze the body, and that's why when you have sleep paralysis, you're trying to move and you're trying to scream, but nothing's happening. So it took me what felt like an age to shake myself out of sleep paralysis after I heard this evil voice. And then I came to and I was like, damn. And it was so like frightening that I didn't even want to go back to sleep. Those ones. But yeah, I haven't had sleep paralysis since about 11 years ago. So maybe my sleep paralysis was associated with stress because I was a lot more stressed back then. Maybe it's a psychological thing, The subconscious mind can manifest strange thoughts, dreams, as a way of trying to process stress and what have you, maybe. Shout out to my guy over there in Ireland. He says, regarding films, have you ever watched the film The Wind That Shakes the Barley? Very good. Black 47 also worth a watch. Happy St. Patrick's Day weekend. Yes, I have watched The Wind That Shakes the Barley. A work colleague of mine, an Irish work colleague of mine, many years ago, gave me the DVD. And he said, watch this film. It stars Cillian Murphy. Yes, I did watch it. I thought it was very interesting. Very interesting. It obviously was about the early, at least in the 20th century, days of the IRA, the Republican movement and what have you. So yeah, very good film. Shout out to you, my bro, for the super chat. Got here one from Jake Lee. Says, off topic, but what are your thoughts on free will? My personal view is that it doesn't really exist, but is a necessary illusion for society. So that's a very deep philosophical, even metaphysical question, isn't it? It's hard to actually, if you take it to its metaphysical extent, it's hard to really say one way or the other whether free will exists. But it depends what you mean by free will. Ultimately, in terms of our physical choices and actions, we have free will. But then, of course, we have our instincts. And so perhaps people will say our instincts and emotions supersede or override any notion of free will. Does that make sense? So it's a deep one. In the Matrix films, obviously, they explore the whole concept of free will. So when Neo has the conversation with the architect in the second film, the architect basically explains to Neo that he hasn't done anything thus far in his journey out of free will. He's been manipulated into the position he's in. And obviously, Neo rejects all that, rejects what the architect is telling him. But by the end of the film, or the end of the third film, it basically suggests that Neo had been manipulated the whole time. If not by the architect, then by the Oracle, that she actually manipulated him. So, yeah, it's a very, very deep philosophical question. Does free will really exist? And again, when you take it back as far as you can go with it metaphysically, it might be impossible to answer, is there free will? It's a deep one. Shout out to you for the super chat. Big up James Clifford for the super chat. He says, $7.99 on Audible for the book. Thanks for the recommendation. We'll check it out. Everyone hit the like button if you just joined, and happy weekend to all. Yeah, big up James Clifford. That book by Peter Duesberg, highly recommended. Inventing the something virus. Listen to that book. It will blow your mind. Not just with regards to what he says about that particular disease, but just the long, long history of medical and scientific fraud on a massive scale. He goes into it going back to the late 1800s. And that guy, Peter Duesberg, is an extremely credentialed individual, with PhDs and all that up the wazoo, right? And he was extremely well respected up until he wrote that book. He went off the plantation with that book. Tony says, do you get a lot of synchronicity, Hatman? I get a certain amount of it for sure, and more of it as I get older, or maybe I'm just noticing it more as I get older. Maybe I wasn't paying as much attention when I was younger. I'm not sure. But yeah, I do get a certain amount of it. Mr. Lucas says, the succubus coming for him, Black Dynamite. Yeah, incubus and succubus. Jermaine says, sounds similar to astral projection. I'd love to be able to astral project, There was a video game, actually, made by I think it was a French developer. The ones who made Heavy Rain. Any of you guys play Heavy Rain? They made a game, which I can't remember the name of, but the main character could basically astral project. And even in Outlast, you guys know the video game Outlast? I did a walkthrough of Outlast back in the days. That game terrified me. When you play it with the headphones on, you're fully immersed in all the sound and all that. It There was so many jump scares. I got anxiety playing that game, I swear down. But in Outlast, the first game, they have like a version of astral projection in that as well. Orca says, when I first had sleep paralysis, I literally thought I died or was in a coma. Yeah, it's quite jarring the first time you have it. The first time I had sleep paralysis, I reckon I was a teenager, and I went to sleep, and then at some point during the night, I thought I'd woken up, and I looked towards the corner of the room, and there was a light on, not the main light, but like, like a lamp or whatever, and there was a silhouette of like a huge fat man in the corner of the room, and he started walking towards me. And obviously when you got sleep paralysis, you can't move, so I was like panicking in my body, trying to scream, trying to move. I must have been like, I don't know, 13 years old or something. This huge fat silhouette was coming towards me, and I was trying to scream, and then when I eventually shook myself out of it, I woke up and the light was not even on, and there was obviously no fat man there. But I'll never forget that. That was the first time I had sleep paralysis. I had no idea what the hell had just happened, you know? Shout out to Black Dynamite for the super chat. He says, I hear that Richard Reactpour suffers from night hag. And day hag too. Dear, oh dear, oh dear. Richard Reactpour's a weirdo, bro. He must have a fetish or something. David says, the series on Netflix called Valhalla has got to be one of the best series I've seen on Netflix since Sons of Anarchy. Okay. Well, there's a reverb I like for those who are into music production and audio engineering. There's a reverb I like called Valhalla. Is it the company that's called Valhalla or just the plugin? For those who are into music production will know the plugin I'm talking about. Valhalla Reverb. Sounds lush. Their vintage verb in particular. Paul McAllister says, yo, Hatman, how are ya? A few beers deep here. Big up Paul McAllister, old school. How you doing, good sir? Orca says, shout out to Orca for the super chat. He says, a great movie was The Grey. Is that starring Liam Neeson? I think I might have seen it. Nathaniel says, Hatman, has anyone ever tried to put it on you? Loads of people over the years. I've been in plenty of scrapes, plenty of street fights and whatever. And obviously when I was a bouncer, constantly having people trying to have a go and whatnot. The early 2000s, it was rough on the doors, you know? Especially the places I worked, or some of the places I worked anyway. Drunk people, people in groups, people on all kind of drugs, roids, Dutch courage. Some people are saying that sleep paralysis incident I had it when I was a teenager might have been John Fury. Beyond Two Souls, yes, I think that's the game that I was alluding to. Made by the same people that created Heavy Rain. Heavy Rain was a pretty good game when it came out. Okay, Macron's wife talked to me. Yeah, I've seen what Candace Owens is saying about Macron's wife. I mean, I don't know. Is she really a woman? I don't know, man. I'm not really that interested, to be fair. Chainsaw says, I remember that one, Hatman. The aim was to find out who murdered you. Matt says games aren't the same anymore. I agree. I want to say that the PS3, Xbox 360 generation was the best of the 2000s, you know, after the 90s. I would say that generation was the best to me personally. Some people might say the PS2 generation was better. PS2 generation was good as well, but I liked the PS3, Xbox 360 generation best. So many great games came out that generation. Sean Barker says Mick Hennessy. Gaz, shout out for the super chat. He says, Hatman, Prime Mercer versus Tua. That's a great matchup, you know. Prime Mercer versus Tua. That's a hell of a fight. You guys always come up with the best matchups, fantasy matchups, and the most difficult ones to pick a winner in. That is a fantastic... I've never even thought of that matchup before, you know. What a great matchup that would have been. Ray Mercer versus David Tua. That is a real tough one to pick. I'll probably go with Tua. See, Mercer did have, in his prime, the mobility. Because Mercer actually, like when he fought Tommy Morrison, he might have been in the high 220s in terms of weight. I'll have to go back and check his box rec, but he wasn't that heavy. When he fought Lewis, he was a lot heavier. He might have been in the high 220s, mid to high 220s when he fought Morrison, and he could actually move when he wanted to. But the thing is, Mercer was a fighter at heart. He didn't like to stick and move. He didn't like to use his legs in a fight. He'd only do it very, very sparingly. Maybe when he was trying to take a little bit of a rest. But I don't recall any fight in Ray Mercer's whole career where he boxed and moved, you know, for the whole 10 or 12 rounds. And because of that, because of his propensity to get involved in a scrap, and he was good in a scrap, don't get it twisted, but Tua was very good in a scrap as well. So I want to say David Tua would have won the fight on points. That's what I would go for, but that's a very, very good matchup. Shout out to Gaz for the super chat on that. Big up Rep for the super chat. He says, do you think extraterrestrials have ever visited Earth? I have absolutely no idea. I'm open to the possibility, but I haven't seen any compelling evidence for it. So, yeah, I've literally got no idea. No idea at all. Shout out to Danny for the super chat. He says, favorite reggaeton songs. Yeah, I'm not into reggaeton, to be honest. Reggaeton, however you want to pronounce it. I'm not really into that. Greg Wright says, Hatman, top 3 hip-hop groups of all time. Top 3 hip-hop groups of all time. Wu-Tang, definitely. I would say Wu-Tang, M.O.P. Wu-Tang, M.O.P. And when I say top 3, these are my maybe favorite. So if some people say there are other groups that are better, cool. I'm just telling you my top 3 as in favorite. Wu-Tang, M.O.P. And I want to say the Locks. You know, the Locks with Jada and Styles P. Jada, Kiss You Now, You Die Now, Why Later, Double R and Violator. Dominic says Mobb Deep, come on. Nah, I prefer the Locks over Mobb Deep as a group. Prodigy really carried Mobb Deep, you know. I never really liked Havoc as a rapper. Obviously, he's a good producer, but lyrically, he carried Mobb Deep. Whereas with the Locks, Jada and Styles were both spitting fire. you know what I mean? So as a group, I prefer the Locks. But Mobb Deep obviously did some classic songs, but it was always about P, you know, it was always about Prodigy. You don't really remember Havoc's lyrics that much, you know, they're kind of forgettable. Shout out to Rich for the super chat. He says, Hatman, how do you think Charlie Zelenoff will get on in a Misfits fight? You know, you could say that Charlie Zelenoff was ahead of his time because Misfits would have been perfect for him, right? I think he would have got smoked. I reckon KSI would have smoked him. Both Paul brothers would have smoked him. Salt Pappy would have smoked him. So I don't think he would have got on very well, to be honest. But that would have been perfect for him. Charlie Z, the Z Train. Jake Lee says, isn't he like 300-0? Yeah, he was John Fury before John Fury, wasn't he? Talking about 300-0 undefeated. And he kept talking about the strength of his punch, measuring it in PSI, you know, pounds per square inch. I can't remember what PSI he said his punches were. But yeah, Charlie Zelenoff was as crazy as a box of frogs. Absolutely nuts. Absolutely nuts. I remember when he sucker punched Floyd Mayweather Sr. You guys remember that? And then the other guys in the gym jumped in and beat the living daylights out of him. And when he turned up to fight Deontay Wilder, and Wilder hit him with his glove turned backwards. That was a madness. Shout out to Danny for the super chat. He says, Hatman, look into Dr. Stephen Krashen if you want to learn Spanish. With his tutelage, I went from knowing hola and gracias to understanding native speakers in less than 6 months. No studying required. Okay. I'll look into that. Somebody says Zelenoff was Wilder's best win. Shots fired. Joe Williams says Prodigy on Shook Ones. His cold was only 19 as well. Yeah, and high on coke when he shot the video at least. Because he said so. Maybe even when he wrote the bars, who knows? Mr. Lucas says, Hatman, thoughts on Frank Smith? Seems a dark character to me. Seems like a bland character to me, personally. It's very bland and quite desperate. Yeah, it's like a desperate character, bland but desperate. And it's often people like that who are the most desperate, you know, bland people. Matthew Berry says, what do you think about, or what do people think about the Undisputed boxing game? I like it, but it gets bad reviews. I've never played it. I don't like boxing games. But to me, it doesn't look very appealing. Boxing King says, did anyone hear the Turkey interview a few hours ago? He was saying he will still work with Matchroom and praised Hearn, but didn't mention Queensbury or the other promoters. Okay, that's interesting. I'll have to check that out. Which channel was it on? Was it on the Ring YouTube channel? I'll have to check that out. Although you do have to bear in mind that Turkey's English is not the greatest, so sometimes he might not articulate what he means that well. But still, I'll definitely like to check it out for myself. Okay, Black Dynamite says it was on Fight Hub. Stats Killer says, last time you sparred? Years ago. Years and years ago. Many years ago. Now, Boxing King says it was on Boxing King Media. It wasn't really an interview, just him talking for 15 minutes. Now, Beast LFC says, Hatman, have you heard of rapper Reggie Capers? Top songs, serving MCs, and Suspect. No, I've never heard of him. Is he new? Ayed says, I think it was a Twitter space. Getting contradictory reports here. Naeem Islam says, Julian Jackson or Canelo at 154. I go Canelo. Paul McAllister says, Frank Smith marrying Emily Eubank reminded me of when Lister from Red Dwarf married that alien. Beast LFC says, no, he's old school. Check him out, 1997. Yeah, never heard of him. Never heard of him. Where was he from? Surely not New York. I would have heard of him if he was from New York. Never heard of him. First Round Boxing says, how do you feel about old films? There's a film called The Setup, underrated classic, a real gritty look at being a B-side fighter in boxing. When you say old films, how old do you mean? Ryan Babel says, what do you think of Edgar Berlanga? Funny character. That about sums up what I think of Edgar Berlanga. Just, Have you ever watched Event Horizon? Yes, Event Horizon is a good film. I like it. Good film. I do like sci-fi. It's one of my favorite genres. Perhaps my very favorite genre could be sci-fi. So yes, that's got the guy from Jurassic Park in it. I'm not sure of the actor's name, but yeah, he was in Jurassic Park. Ayed says, did you complete Outlast Hatman? I couldn't do it. Yeah, I did. I completed Outlast and the DLC, Whistleblower. It was on one of my other YouTube channels, which I no longer have. But I uploaded the entire walkthrough, Outlast and Whistleblower, to my Patreon page a few months ago. So a lot of people found it very funny. Me going, jumping out of my skin at all the jump scares. How much of a chance do I give Adric Caballel against Usyk? Well, after his last few performances, I'd have to give him a decent chance, I'd still make Usyk the favorite. But Caballel has shown an aptitude for body punching. And we know Usyk don't like it to the body, but you got to catch him in the sweet spot, right? And you got to worry about what's coming back at you. He's got great footwork and whatnot. So it's easier said than done. Thank you, Mr. Lucas. Sam Neill is the actor. That's right. In Event Horizon. And Event Horizon, by the way, as many movies have done, inspired several video games, but in particular, the original Dead Space. So the creator of the original Dead Space spoke about the fact that Event Horizon heavily influenced the making of that game. Just like the movie Black Hawk Down influenced certain aspects of the Call of Duty COD 4 campaign. The original Modern Warfare that came out in, when was that, 2007? When the original Modern Warfare came out? Parts of the campaign were inspired by Black Hawk Down. So yeah, a lot of video games took inspiration from movies. Afro Jam says 2009. Are you sure? No, COD 4 didn't come out in 2009. You're thinking of Modern Warfare 2. Modern Warfare 2 came out in 2009. COD 4 came out, I'm pretty sure, 2007. 2007. I'm pretty sure COD 4 was 2007. Yeah. Rich is saying I'm sure it was 2007. Modern Warfare 2 came out 2009. Dominic says, Hatman, is there an Akoli replacement announced? Not as far as I'm aware, no. Yeah, World at War was 08. Was that when they first introduced zombies? Was World at War? That was the first time they had zombies, right? BL says, Hatman, what did you think of the film 13 Ghosts? I think I've seen it, but I literally can't remember it. Ayed says, World at War, yes, first zombies. Linkage says, no, that was... No. World at War had zombies, before Black Ops 1. But Black Ops 1 zombies are still my favorite, even though it's the most simple. That was still my favorite zombies. KS says, have you played Gears of War, Hatman? Yeah, I was never really a fan of Gears of War. And the guy who created Gears of War, Cliffy B, what a weird character he was. He was like the cockiest game developer of all time, Cliffy B. I was never really a fan of Gears of War. Black Dynamite says, did you ever upload a video of yourself setting up the PlayStation Move sharpshooter for Killzone? Nah, I never used the sharpshooter for Killzone, but it was basically like an aimbot. It became unplayable when people discovered that sharpshooter for Killzone. It was literally like an aimbot. It broke the game. That was Killzone 3, where people were using that. Cosa Nostra says, did Fury over or underachieve? I would say underachieved. He didn't keep himself in shape. And was too obsessed with preserving his unbeaten record. He underachieved. Because Fury's very talented. Don't get that twisted. He's a very, very talented fighter. And could have done more if he kept himself in shape and was willing to put himself out there and fight whoever. Solid Snake says, did you ever play the game Manhunt back in the days? It was banned in a lot of countries for its violence, but it was a good horror game. It was also set in the PS2 GTA universe. I don't think so, but back in the days, in the PS1, PS2 generation, we used to rent games from Blockbuster, for a couple days. So I might have rented it at some point and forgotten about it. But in terms of owning it, I don't think I'm pretty sure neither me or my brothers owned that game, if I did ever play it. But I played a game called Driver, which inspired the GTA games. Because the original GTA games were bird's eye view. I think GTA 1 and 2 were bird's eye view. And Driver came out during that time. And the next GTA, I think, might have been GTA 3, was the first one that was in 3D or whatever. I say 3D, you know, like not 3D as we think of it today, but just not a top-down view. You know, bird's eye view. Driver did what GTA does before GTA did it, if that makes sense. Shout out to High Noon for the super chat. He says they don't make sci-fi like they used to. Effects, music, labyrinthian, labyrinth, never-ending story, Flight of the Navigator, Inner Space, RoboCop can go on. All right, you're talking about 80s sci-fi. They were kind of like heartwarming sci-fi films, you know? Well, not so much RoboCop. But certainly the never-ending story, Flight of the Navigator, Inner Space. Did Inner Space have Dennis Quaid in it? Was it Dennis Quaid in Inner Space? Labyrinth. Yep, it's an old school one. Never-ending story with a big dog. The 80s and 90s were both great for sci-fi. Shout out to High Noon for that super chat there. Shout out to Kylie in the chat. Brian Murphy says, love your stuff, Hatman. I think you may be a bit confused about Nosferatu. It's not a remake of Bram Stoker's Dracula. It's actually a remake of the first Dracula movie called Nosferatu. Now, I'm aware of that, but I was referring to the critics of Nosferatu because they all are criticizing it. If you go to like Metacritic or Rotten Tomatoes, it's just full of a bunch of negative reviews saying, oh, they've just ripped off Bram Stoker's Dracula. It's just a remake of Bram Stoker's Dracula. And it is the same story as Bram Stoker's Dracula. I know that Nosferatu goes back much further than that. I'm very well aware of that. I'm not confused about anything. But again, I'm responding to the critics of Nosferatu because Bram Stoker's Dracula was so highly thought of and so well known. But personally, I liked Nosferatu. The Nosferatu character, the vampire, isn't as iconic or as good overall as Gary Oldman's Dracula and Bram Stoker. But there's certain things about Nosferatu that I preferred. It's a more serious film. It's got a more dark and somber tone. Whereas Bram Stoker's Dracula was quite camp. You know, it's quite a camp, over-the-top, like, theatrical movie. I didn't like Keanu Reeves in Bram Stoker at all. Chili Beef says, who remembers that old school hood movie Trespass? Has that got Ice-T in it? I swear I did see that back in the days. There was Ricochet. Oh no, maybe I'm thinking, is Ricochet the one with Ice-T in it? There was Ricochet, Trespass, New Jack City. With Nino Brown. That definitely had Ice-T in it. Because Ice-T and Wesley Snipes, right? Wesley Snipes plays Nino Brown and he gets beat up by Ice-T at some point. Jimmy Gibbs says, remember Shutters, Hatman? Yup. I remember when it came out as kind of like in its unfinished format. So it was doing the rounds on like VHS tape before it got an official release. And like the rough cut of Shutters had like a different soundtrack. The soundtrack was better, but presumably they couldn't get clearance to use some of the songs when the official version eventually came out. So it had a completely different soundtrack, but the original had a better soundtrack. Shout out to Chili Beef. It's election day. Yep. Bill the Butcher. Big up Chili Beef every time. One of my favorite films of all time is Gangs of New York, in case some of you haven't heard me mention it. Yes, Jimmy Gibbs. Tetty wa and lefty wa. Sound like a pussy hole. Shout out to Daddy for the super chat. He says, Hatman, would you date Latinas or white women if they ticked your boxes? I know you said Tikas marry relatively early, but how's the general dating scene over there for gringos? The dating scene is gringos tend to date gringos. Yeah, because there are so many gringos here. You're not going to find it difficult to locate somebody to date. In terms of dating Tikas, not many people do it. Truth be told, it's quite a rarity. Sometimes, some people do, but it's not that common from what I've seen. Gringos tend to date other gringos. And, particularly at this stage of my life, I wouldn't want to get into a relationship with someone who I wasn't willing to have kids with. And so somebody from a completely other culture and all that kind of stuff, just for the sake of the kids, I wouldn't really want to do that. I wouldn't want a kid to be stuck between two totally different cultures and, rejected maybe by both cultures. I won't really want to do that to the kids. Okay, this guy says, Trespassers got Ice-T and Ice Cube starring in the movie, and Ricochet is starring Denzel Washington. BL says Boomerang. Yeah, Boomerang is one of my favorite Eddie Murphy movies. Maybe the favorite Eddie Murphy movie of all time for me is Boomerang. Hilarious. So many iconic lines in there, iconic scenes. It's a great film, Boomerang. It's got Chris Rock in there, Martin Lawrence, Eddie Murphy, obviously, Grace Jones, Halle Berry. Who else is in there? John Witherspoon. He's in there. Chris Rock. Yeah, I mentioned Chris Rock. Robin Givens. It's an all-star cast. It's a great film. And it's also got the guy who played Baron Samedi in James Bond. He's in there as some old pervert. He's hilarious. The guy who played Baron Samedi, I'm not sure what his name is. I think he was a well-known theater actor back in the days. Afro Jam says Grace Jones fitted that character. Yeah, to a T. To a T. Chili Beef says, what about some guilty pleasures you have, Hatman? Films, games, whatever. Guilty pleasures. Pleasures. There's quite a lot of terrible movies over the years that I've liked. I can't think of any off the top of my head right now, but I know there are some terrible movies that I like. But that's the difference. When I like a terrible movie, I acknowledge it's terrible. Whereas most other people, when they like a terrible movie, they'll try to convince everybody it's good. Yeah, I've seen City of God, the Brazilian one. There's also a film I saw back in the days that's pretty good called Sotsi, which is a South African film. Tony says Street Fighter 2 the movie for me. Yeah, Street Fighter 2 the movie, absolutely shockingly bad. Shocking. And speaking of Street Fighter 2, I've been watching a lot of those AI generated shorts on YouTube, and some of them are really impressive. You know, they got like realistic, photorealistic looking short animations of the Street Fighter characters. Nothing will beat Street Fighter 2 for an iconic fighting game, you know? I remember playing Street Fighter 2 in the arcade back in the days, in the early 1990s. And the music was incredible. They don't make video game music like they used to. Street Fighter 2, the Guile stage, that might be the best fighting game video music of all time. Fighting game video music, that doesn't even make sense. Fighting video game music of all time might be the Guile theme. No, that's not it, is it? It's oh yeah, that's how it goes. That's how it starts. Yeah, Sonic Boom, Sonic Boom, Tiger uppercut, Tiger, Yoga Fire, and all that. Yoga Fire. AJ says, nah, Double Dragon was the best. No, come on, man. Double Dragon ain't a patch on Street Fighter 2. I played all them games, Golden Axe, Double Dragon, and whatnot, but no, man, Street Fighter was different league. Chili Beef says, you ever seen Unforgiven, R.I.P. Gene Hackman? No, I don't think I ever have seen it, but I saw you talking about it the other day in the Element group, Unforgiven. So I'm going to try and locate it. Chainsaw says, have you seen the Human Centipede, Hatman? No, I haven't, but I've got no desire to watch it. I know what the premise is. Don't want to watch no disgusting ish like that. Chili Beef says, nah, Streets of Rage 2 has the best fighting game music, hands down. Well, Streets of Rage isn't a fighting game like I'm talking about. Do you know what I mean? I mean like versus fighting games. Streets of Rage was like a beat 'em up rather than like a competitive fighting game. And I still prefer Street Fighter music anyway, Street Fighter 2. Shout out to High Noon for the super chat. It says, are you conscious about diet? If so, what do you mainly eat? I've removed carbs and eat all organic meats, fruit and veg. Didn't mean to, but weight has dropped and I'm doing nothing. Street Fighter 2, amazing. Top 5 SNES games. Yeah, I've talked quite a bit in recent live streams about my dieting. In my 40s, it's much more difficult to keep the weight down. So I've taken to keto diets. I mean, it doesn't sound like you're on a keto diet because fruit contain, you know, fruit is not keto friendly, a lot of fruit, because it contains natural sugars and whatnot. Not that it's unhealthy, you know, if it's working for you, it's working for you. But yeah, currently I'm on a keto diet and I'm eating the same thing most days, which is poached eggs, spinach. I take some electrolyte water and a couple times a week I'll have lamb chops as well. Obviously, I'm not staying on that diet permanently. I'm getting down to the weight I want to be. And then I'll introduce, you know, a little bit of carbs and mix up the diet a bit more. But I'm on a hardcore keto diet right now. And in my 40s, I found that is necessary in order to lose weight and keep weight down. And also water fasting, which is even more hardcore. Shout out to Danny for the super chat again. He says, Hatman, do you think gringos that don't speak Spanish are taken advantage of by locals and women over there, especially naive young guys? Yes, gringos are taken advantage of, more so if they don't speak Spanish. But rather than it being naive young guys, it's actually more so older guys who tend to get taken advantage of by women down here. Like older guys from America who are in their 50s, 40s, 50s, even 60s. They meet some young Tika who's like in her 20s and she's all over him and, saying she loves him and this, that, and the other. And she rinses him for money. One of the things that you need to be aware of in Costa Rica is that their legal system is completely different. I forget the terminology now, but their legal system is not based on English common law. I think it's like based on Roman law or something, because it's, the Spanish-speaking world. So their legal system is totally different. And what a lot of Ticos do, what a lot of Costa Ricans do to protect themselves legally in relationships is they put everything that they own in a corporation. They set up corporations and they'll have their house owned by a corporation and all this kind of weird stuff that you don't tend to have to do in countries which are run under English common law. So here they set up corporations and their car is owned by a corporation, which they set up, their house and all that kind of stuff. And that basically protects them against, a wife or let's just say a wife taking their stuff when they split up and whatnot. So yeah, it's very, very different, the legal system here. Very different. I really don't understand it. I only understand little bits about it. And as I say, it tends to be older guys who come down here, maybe divorcees and whatnot. And, some young hot thing puts it on them. And yeah, they end up getting rinsed. Rexan says, Hatman, you don't have to go keto or fast to lose weight even in your 40s. Well, everybody's body's different, and I do have to do that. Trust me. What works for you or somebody else doesn't work for everybody. People's bodies are different. People's metabolisms are different. People's body composition and all that kind of stuff is different. And for me, I absolutely 100% have to do keto and water fasting to lose weight at this age. 100%. When I was younger, I didn't have to. But at this age, that's the only thing that will shift weight. Because you just end up going in, you end up going into this equilibrium where you've just got this body fat on you and it won't go away. Even when you're eating relatively healthy or relatively active, so on and so forth. And this body fat just sticks on you. Or at least for me, it just sticks on me. It won't go anywhere. I have to do these hardcore diets to get it off. Chili Beef says, Hatman, tell the truth. Have you ever listened to the Dead Rabbit's flute drum tune while training? Not while training, but I've just listened to it like in the car, or in the house. I like that piece of music. It's called Shimmy She Wobble. That's the name of that piece of music, Shimmy She Wobble. And it's by an African-American, what are they called now? A fife and drum band. I think that's the style of music that it is. Fife and drum. I think that's what it's called. They're an African-American band. And that style of music was, I think, common in the South among African-Americans going back several centuries. And there's only a few of those bands left now. Chili Beef says, intermittent fasting works very well for me. and I'm in my early 40s doesn't mean it will work for anyone else. All our bodies react differently indeed. Rick Sand says, so you wouldn't lose weight on a 1,200 cal diet with high protein and a lot of activities? No, I wouldn't be as toned as I want to be on that kind of diet with carbs and whatnot. Shout out to GMS Nightmare for the super chat. He says, as someone who wants to leave the UK, can you share the pros you have experienced so far since leaving and any tips you may have? The pros, depends where you're going, but for where I've gone, the weather, obviously. I hate cold weather. I like warm weather, so, move to a tropical country. And fantastic. Cons would be the rainy season here is pretty intense. So, obviously it rains a lot in the UK as well, but at least here when it rains, it's warm. So, yeah, the cons would be the rainy season. The language, can be an issue, but I live in an area heavily populated with gringos, so it's not really much of an issue for me. What are the other cons? Mosquitoes. You get tore up from the flow up out here by the mosquitoes. Dear, oh dear. You do develop eventually some kind of resistance to their bites, because the bites I get now are not as severe. But when I first came here, my days, I was getting tore up so bad by the mosquitoes. It was a shocker. And most people do that come here for the first time. The mosquitoes just, rip you to shreds. Far worse than any mosquitoes I've dealt with in the Caribbean and whatnot. Terrible, terrible mosquitoes here. Cons. Being gringo priced is not nice. This does happen from time to time when you get gringo priced. But overall, not too many negatives, to be honest. And tips I may have. What would the tips be? Obviously, get to know the locals as much as you can. Because locals can help you when it comes to like renting or even buying property. You can get locals to negotiate for you. And that way you don't get gringo priced. That's what most gringos do here. They get locals to negotiate for them. So that's one tip I can give you. Befriend a local and get them to do stuff on your behalf. Even if you have to pay them, it's worth it. Shout out to Mr. Merkel for the super chat. He says, yo, Hatman, just tuning in. Who's your top 5 artists of all time? And what's the best live performance you've ever witnessed and where? I couldn't give you a top 5 artists of all time because there are just too many artists that I like in too many different genres. So impossible to give you a top 5 artists of all time. But best performance I've witnessed live and where? As far as rap artists, I would say maybe Ludacris. Yeah, I went to see Ludacris at the Kentish Town Forum. I can't tell you what year it was. It would have been sometime in maybe the late 90s or early 2000s. I want to say late 90s. Very late 90s, maybe. And I saw Ludacris perform, and he was better than any other rapper I saw live. Ludacris. And I'm not even like a massive Ludacris fan, but I used to go to Friday Night Flavors events a lot. DJ 279. And I think that was a Friday Night Flavors event. I don't think it was a Westwood event. I think it was a Friday Night Flavors event. Ludacris, Kentish Town Forum. But I saw many rappers. I saw Eminem perform. I think that was his first ever UK performance. I'm certain it was, actually. His first ever UK performance was at Subterranea in Ladbroke Grove. I was there at his first ever UK performance. That was before he really blew up. I think that was actually, it might have been before the Slim Shady LP came out. Just before. And he was there with, I think, Proof. And he only performed a couple songs and then said, that's it, I'm done. And the crowd started booing. They were like, wow, we paid to come see Eminem and he only does like 2 songs. And then he came back on the stage and started saying that the promoter is not paying him enough money and this, that, and the other. But yeah, I saw Eminem perform, Gangstar perform, and Master Ace, Ludacris, Freddie Fox, Busta Rhymes. Got so many artists over the years, back in the 90s in particular, that I went to go watch. But I would say Ludacris was a standout. Shout out to Mr. Merkel. Shout out to Danny for the super chat. He says, Hatman, do you have any desires to visit ancient sites, pyramids, Machu Picchu, Mayan pyramids? And you need a tika to avoid gringo prices. Yeah. I would like to visit ancient sites, but not the ones that everybody else goes to. Because, I don't know, I feel like if I'm to have any kind of profound experience visiting these places, it's less likely going to somewhere that gets thousands or millions of tourists going through there every year. So as fantastic as the Great Pyramids are and the Mayan pyramids and whatnot, they're just so rinsed by tourists at this stage. I would prefer to see the pyramids in Sudan, in northern Sudan and the Nubia region in southern Egypt. I prefer to see the pyramids there. Ethiopia as well. I'd like to see a lot of their ancient sites. The Lalibela churches, the enormous obelisk that they have at Axum, which is like the biggest monolith in known human history, is one of the obelisks that they have in Ethiopia. Like the largest monument carved out of a single piece of stone anywhere in the world that is known of is in Ethiopia. So I'd like to go visit that. But the problem is some of these places are unstable and there's like conflicts there. Sudan, there's a lot of conflicts going on there. Ethiopia, they have a lot of unstable regions. I'd also like to go see Great Zimbabwe in Zimbabwe, obviously. Like to see these places because they're not as popular as the other ones that you mentioned, So you get more time at those spots to really take them in. You go to the pyramids at Giza and it's, you're not going to get a lot of time by yourself to really appreciate those monuments. You're going to be there with dozens or hundreds of other tourists. Shout out to Danny for the super chat. Shout out to GMS. He says, what's your views on marriage and monogamy? I believe in marriage. As far as monogamy, I don't think it's the right thing for everybody. I believe in polygyny, which is the right or the ability for men to marry more than one woman. I do believe in that. Not that every man should do it. It's not going to be right for every man. But I believe in men having the right to do that. Yeah. Donage says, do you believe in UFOs? Well, UFOs are just unidentified flying objects, right? So there are loads of unidentified flying objects in the sky. If you mean UFOs piloted by aliens, I've got no idea. I've never seen any evidence for, or any compelling evidence for UFOs piloted by aliens, but I guess I'm open to the possibility. The Foo Fighters are, I'm not talking about the band, I mean the phenomena. Foo Fighters were very interesting, you know, in World War II. And many commercial pilots as well as military pilots have seen these orbs in the sky. And some people say, well, it's ball lightning, because there's this alleged phenomenon called ball lightning, which people have reported coming into their homes through windows and whatnot. But the people that have seen, the pilots that have seen these orbs in the sky, say that they act as if they're under intelligent control. So what they are and what they're all about, God only knows. Osaka says, what about women having 4 husbands? No, I do not agree with that. So yeah, I've already answered that person's, you know, there's this thing in the modern West about both genders, male and female, being able to behave in the same way. And somehow that being healthy, that is completely insane. Male and female exist for a reason. Male and female are different for a reason. Therefore, the idea that they should behave in the same way and there be no negative consequences completely goes against nature's design. Right? Yes, there are double standards for male, but also for female. As a male, who gets drafted when a war happens? Is you. Women don't get drafted. When a ship is sinking, who do they save first? The women and the kids. So yes, women have certain privileges as part of their gender role. Yeah, as part of the gender roles, the traditional gender roles, women get certain privileges, but they also get certain responsibilities, and the same for men. We as men have certain privileges, but we also have certain responsibilities that women don't have. Again, we're the ones who get drafted and have to go war. I mean, men are expected to be upwardly mobile as far as their earnings and their career in order to attract a mate. So we have this pressure on us all the time. In order for a woman to take us seriously, we have to have our ish together, you know? Whereas as a man, for the most part, we don't look for a woman to be our provider. Therefore, we don't care if she's not earning money, you know, so there are double standards. But as men, we tend to accept the double standards. But in the modern West, women don't accept the double standards. They only want to accept the things that benefit them, and then they complain about the doubles. They're happy to accept the double standards that benefit them, but they complain about the double standards that benefit men, you know. So yeah, long story short, I believe in polygyny, which is the right or the ability for men to marry multiple women, but not the other way around. No, I don't think that's healthy for society. Shout out to Matt for the super chat. He says, what's up, bro? Did you see that bag of potatoes that Berlanga's going to fight? Also, he's overweight. You think it's the chain or his actual weight? No, I haven't seen who Berlanga's going to fight. I'll have to check it out after the stream. But Berlanga does wear massive chains. Yeah, I've seen his huge necklaces and whatnot. He likes all that bling. He's like a rapper, Edgar Berlanga. But shout out to Matt for the super chat. I'll check out his... let me check out his opponent now quickly. Let me have a look. Have they done the weigh-in? And I'll get to the other super chats in a second. Let me have a look here. Edgar Berlanga weigh-in. Let's have a look. Yeah, this guy does look fat. He's got a big tire around his body. Belanga's got the ice on. This guy's shorter than Berlanga and he's fat. Okay. He's got a Tyson Fury type tire around his waist there. Puerto Rican guy as well. Yeah, that waist is crazy. Man looks like he's just recovering from pregnancy. Never seen this guy before. This is Belanga's last fight on his Matchroom contract, as far as I'm aware. Shout out to Matt. Shout out to Bobs for the super chat. He says, a short fighter with fast hands like a serious Ruiz would give Usyk his toughest challenge at heavyweight, I think. Who right now could do that? A Talma? But he probably doesn't have enough experience to give Usyk a real challenge just yet. CPB says, I don't agree with... And sorry, to answer Bob's question, yeah, maybe a Talma, maybe, as other people have suggested, Caballel. Not that his hands are anywhere near as fast as Ruiz, but he's a good body puncher, and he's on a good roll right now. CPB says, I don't agree with men marrying more than one woman, but women can't do the same. If a woman is committed to me, and only me, then I should be able to do the same in return. Okay, so you're kind of missing the point of what I'm saying. I'm not saying that men have to marry more than one woman. In a society that allows polygyny, polygyny is an option. So a man can do it if he wants to, and obviously he will discuss it with his wife. You know, they'll discuss before they get married, are you going to marry another wife, blah, 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 etc., etc. Maybe you're coming from a Christian perspective, but I completely agree with polygyny. I believe in polygyny. And the reason I believe in polygyny is because, the idea is to stop men from cheating, because the male of most mammal species has a more promiscuous instinct and is less inclined to monogamy than females are. And so to cater for this instinct, but also contain it, because what you don't want is men running around just, breeding up women left, right, and center, because that is destructive for society. Yeah, but some men are just like wild dogs. They can't help themselves. Their hormones, their testosterone, their libido is so strong that they'll go flipping crazy if they don't have an outlet, and they can't stick to one woman. So rather than cheating on the woman and all this kind of stuff, in Islamic society, for example, they allow a man to have up to 4 wives. And that way it legitimizes everything. It brings everything out in the open. Nobody's doing anything behind anyone's back. I mean, not to say that Muslim men don't cheat on their wives, but, as a system, it is designed to, to reduce the instances of cheating. But this is one of the reasons I believe in polygyny. When women behave like men sexually, it tends to be more serious. So, for example, when women cheat, they tend to completely emotionally check out from the man that they're with. Whereas when men cheat, they tend not to check out. Sometimes they might check out, but a man can have his wife that he loves completely and be cheating on her with little side pieces, and he never stops loving his wife. Whereas when a woman starts cheating, because of the way that they process emotions and the way the emotions are linked to sex with women, is very different. If a woman's cheating, she's gone. Emotionally, she's gone. She's checked out. The only reason she might stay would be for money in most cases. So again, men and women are very, very different. So having the same rules for men and women with regards to dating, marriage, it doesn't make sense because men and women are different. The same as in other aspects in society. Having the same rules for men and women doesn't make sense. Yeah? It's like men are expected to physically defend a woman, right? And if a man doesn't, if a man is challenged or his woman is in some type of peril from a threat and the man doesn't do what he's supposed to do, he will then be looked down upon. He will then be shamed, right? But you put a woman in that situation, if she doesn't defend her man physically, she's not shamed in that way. That's not expected of her. You see? Gender roles are not some patriarchal male, artificial construct. They're written into nature. I don't think we should be running away and demonizing gender roles and the double standards. There are privileges that females get as part of their gender role, and there are privileges that men get. And in my view, polygyny should be one of the privileges that men get. And also, another thing is that one thing I've found over the years is actually women tend not to like a lot. I'm not saying all women, but a lot of women, despite what they may say and despite what they may think in their minds, they tend not to like men that much who are monogamous. I'm just telling you, when a man has got side pieces and other women who he's entertaining, his main woman is going to be more interested and stay interested for longer. This is contradicted by what women say, but the guys who normally get left are usually monogamous guys who are really committed to their woman. They're the ones who tend to get cheated on and left more, in my experience. The last place you should go for advice about women, in most cases, is women. Because they don't understand, a lot of the time, their own psychology themselves. They don't understand what makes themselves tick. Men have to lead. You know what I mean? And so, anyway, not to go down that rabbit hole too deep. But yeah, I completely believe in polygyny. Not cheating, because, cheating is a thing where you're doing something behind somebody's back. And also you could be bringing diseases into the relationship, and that's wrong. That's foul, right? But if a guy is up front and tells a woman who he's about to enter a relationship with, look, I'm going to have other women. It is what it is. If you don't like it, you don't have to be with me. But this is the way things are going to go. Yeah. And obviously with polygyny, you're going to be living in a country where it's legal for one. And the man may tell the woman straight up, yeah, I'm marrying you, but you may only be my first wife, my senior wife. I might take other wives after you. And the woman can decide to, agree to go ahead with marrying the guy or not. I mean, in South Africa, where they allow polygamy, you get guys marrying multiple women on the same day. You know what I mean? Like, you'll marry like 4 women on the same day. Everything's up front. Everybody knows what they're getting into. I don't see the issue with it. Nobody's being lied to. It's a take it or leave it situation. KS said things perfectly there. That, yeah, the modern women, they want the benefits of being a man without the responsibilities of being a man. It's exactly that. Exactly that. The benefits of being a man without the responsibilities. Well, Saka Castle says multiple partners seems very complex. Monogamy makes more sense. Not to me. Polygyny is as old as the hills. Successful men have been taking multiple wives and multiple women for centuries upon centuries. Because, as I say, women respect men who are popular with women. If you're a guy who isn't being pursued and lusted after and whatever by lots of other women, chances are your woman doesn't really like you that much. I'm just telling you, as an older guy who's been there, seen it and done it, women like men who other women like. That's one of the differences between men and women. See, we as men like being with a woman who doesn't get loads of male attention. You know, she's like a diamond in the rough and she's flying under the radar. You know, she's like Lois Lane in Superman. Not Lois Lane, it's probably not a good example. Rocky's wife. You know, one of them girls who's like dresses conservative, but underneath it all, she's really beautiful. That's like a man's dream, right? To a lot of men, because she'll fly under the radar and other men won't be on her case. We don't see her as any less because she doesn't get a load of male attention because she dresses conservative. We think that's perfect, right? But women are not like that. Some of them might be, but the majority of women, they need their man to be validated by other women. This is what they need. They will lose interest in a guy who they've been with for years if he's not getting female attention. And this is why, as I say, one of the reasons I believe in polygyny. You know, women will tend to treat a man better if they're having to be in constant competition with other women for his attention. If there's no competition for the woman for a man, that's when she's going to start to act up. That's just the way it is. It's just the way it is. It's just the weird complexities of female nature, you know? It's contradictory, that their nature is often contradictory and self-defeating, it would seem, you know? But that's what they're like, bro. I didn't make them that way. I'm just telling you as a middle-aged guy what I've observed and experienced over the decades. And that's what they're like. And never mind what they tell you. Yeah, because females will tell you a whole heap of stuff about how they want to be treated and this, that, and the other. Yeah, you go ahead and do that, and you'll find yourself being taken for a fool. Telling you. The best advice you can get about women is from men. It's not from women. Again, I'm not saying all women are like this. It doesn't apply to 100% of them. But I want to say the majority of them. Yeah. Because, you know, men, we are more logical generally, and they are more led by emotions. And that's why they tend to do things that are contradictory and illogical for them, and so on. Shout out to Matt for the super chat. He says, also, do you think the United States is the most diverse politically? Because whenever I see someone blame the left or the right for an issue, it's beyond belief. So much hatred for nothing. I would say the USA is definitely the most politically diverse Western country, for sure. 100%. There's way more political diversity in the United States than there is in Britain. Definitely. Because of the size of the United States. You know, legally, as I understand it, the United States is technically 50 different countries, right? 50 separate countries. And again, there are different cliques and there are different movements and whatnot. So yeah, there's more political diversity in America than there is in any other Western country, as far as I'm aware. But the left-right paradigm is silly. You know, the left-right dichotomy that people buy into is silly in the sense that people on the right blame the left for everything bad in the country, and people on the left blame the right for everything bad, when really it's like 6 of one and half a dozen of the other. Like in a live stream the other day, there was some guy claiming that crime in New York is terrible because of the Democrats. And I was like, you do realize that in the 1980s, when the Republicans were in power, crime in New York was like the highest it's ever been in history. So it's not as simple as saying crime is high because of the Democrats. There are many, many other factors that influence, you know, serious crime and so on and so forth. It isn't all just down to whether it's a Democrat government or a conservative or a Republican government. It's more complex than that. But yeah, in politics, they simplify everything down to like this childlike left-right paradigm, you know? It's very childlike. It's very oversimplistic. And now, more than ever before in my lifetime, there's all this demagoguery going on in politics where they are appealing to people's lowest instincts. Pretty much all politics now in the West is just demagoguery. Rabble rousing, you know? It's just, yeah. I hate politics. I hate it. So much lying and, yeah, can't stand it. Shout out to Danny for the super chat. He says, have you been in any altercations with pushy locals? And how do you navigate a situation when you know they're trying to pull a fast one? No, you know, Ticos aren't really that way inclined. They're not really aggressive people. You do get like beach vendors. If you go to the beach, you get beach vendors coming up trying to sell you stuff. But when you don't want to buy, they're not really, you know, they just go. They don't really act silly about it. There was one weird incident I had where some woman, when I was, you know, sat down having a meal at a restaurant on the beach, there was some Costa Rican woman who came up to me and she couldn't speak a word of English. She handed me a handwritten letter that had been written in English, right? And I was sitting at the table having my meal, very rude, right? She handed me the letter that was written in English, and I looked at it, and it was some kind of appeal because her daughter or whatever was terminally ill with this, that, and the other. And I was like, okay, so this is your grift. The other people on the beach, they go around selling stuff, and you go around showing people this letter, you know, to gringos, expecting that they're going to give you a load of money. And I was like, I ain't got no money because you've interrupted my meal. You haven't even, you know, come up to me when I'm walking on the beach or when I'm not otherwise occupied. You've had no regard for, you know, my space or whatever. And you just handed me this letter and expect money. I was like, no, I ain't got no money for you. And then she started muttering a bunch of like Spanish. She looked very upset. And she was obviously insulting me in Spanish. I didn't understand any of it. But that's about the most pushy or hostile thing that's happened with a local. Generally, when you say no, they just leave you alone. So I haven't come into any kind of conflict like that. Shout out to Danny for the super chat. Evil Uncle Phil says exactly whatever females say is to be taken for a grain of salt. Their actions are everything. Exactly that. Exactly that. Watch their actions. Don't watch what they say. Because they don't even know what, you know, their feelings change so often. It's like you can't even read into the things they say. You need to watch what they do. Osaka Castle says, are you Sunni, Hatman? No, I'm not religious. I'm not religious at all. I'm not a Muslim, Christian, Jew, or anything like that. I'm not a religious person. But I do believe that, I do believe in many of the ideas in certain religions. Yeah, but I'm not religious myself. Now, Andrew says, is your current woman okay with your view on polygamy? Well, she knows about it. She hasn't said anything about not agreeing with it. So it is what it is. Maybe she's keeping her disagreement to herself. I don't hide these things, you know. I'm very upfront about my views when I meet a woman because I'm thinking this could potentially be a serious relationship. She needs to know who I am right off the bat. I'm not going to hide it. I'm not one of these guys who tries to impress women. I never do that. I showed him immediately who I am and what I'm about. I don't try to play Mr. Nice Guy or any of that. I mean, I'm nice, as in, you know, reciprocating energy, but I'm not going to pretend and hide certain aspects of my personality because I think she might be offended or whatever the case may be. No, I ain't got time for that. I'm in my mid-40s. So I'm telling you who I am up front. Shout out to Charles B in the chat. Osaka Castle says US politics is not diverse. The sense of their structure, because the Republicans and Democrats are broad coalitions, but federally, yes, all the states are tiny countries. Well, again, I'm comparing US politics to, let's say, UK politics. It's far more diverse. So, for example, in the US, there is genuine conservatism, okay, within the political class, you know, in the world of politics. There is genuine conservatism that exists. In UK politics, there is no genuine conservatism at all. None. It's just varying shades of liberalism. There's no actual real conservatism in British politics whatsoever. I mean, in America, they've got like the Libertarian Party, for example. There's nothing like that. Certainly not with that much support in the UK. Nothing like that. Because, of course, you've got the American Constitution, which, libertarians are very attached to, so on and so forth. So, yeah, the political diversity in America is way beyond most Western countries, if not all of them. Way beyond. Shout out to Matt for the super chat. He says, what are your thoughts on transgender rights, LGBT rights? I've noticed in the past 5 years there's been a lot more hate towards that. Personally, I don't care. All right, I've got to tread lightly on this platform talking about stuff like this. I'll say this. I don't believe in criminalizing what people do in their bedrooms behind closed doors with other people who are also adults, right? As long as it's all consensual, I don't believe in criminalizing that. But I don't necessarily think it's something, I don't necessarily think that certain choices in that regard should be publicized and promoted. I don't think that's necessarily healthy either, especially not promoting them to kids. I mean, I'm of the view that kids shouldn't receive any kind of, sexual education until they're in high school, secondary school. So, yeah, I think you can extrapolate and interpret what I mean here. I am relatively socially conservative. And I say relatively because in the West, I would be considered very socially conservative, right? But outside of the West, in many traditional societies, I might be considered borderline liberal, So it's all a matter of perspective. If I went to live in Saudi Arabia, I'd be considered liberal. But in Britain, I'd be considered conservative. Shout out to Matt again for the super chat. He says, it doesn't impact my life, so I don't know why anyone else should care. Just keep walking down the street. It's not like you're being harmed, bro. Again, I am not someone that likes, how can I describe it? I'm not a hedonist. So when I see, for example, Western people engaging in like sexual acts with women, men and women down back alleys and stuff like that, I'm not a fan of all that. Yeah. So I'm conservative in that way. Even with heterosexual people, I'm conservative. When people are falling out drunk everywhere and throwing up in the street, and I'm not a fan of all that, bro. I'm not a fan of hedonism. And I'm somebody who is concerned about social cohesion and minimizing human suffering. You can never eliminate human suffering, of course. There's no utopia in this world that's possible. But in my view, it's not even my view, it's just my way. Yeah? I believe in a multipolar world, different strokes for different folks. I've got no desire for the entire world to be under the same system and the same culture. No. When you have a multipolar world where you have different systems and different types of societies all over the place, you then have choice, don't you? If you don't like it in a very conservative society, you can move to a more liberal society and vice versa. Or find somewhere in between. It just so happens that I'm more of a socially conservative nature. So I tend to gravitate more towards those type of societies and that type of culture. So it's whatever you prefer. But me personally, as I say, I'm more on the socially conservative side. Shout out to Danny. He says, are Transformers common there like in Thailand? No. I mean, here, up until maybe 10 or 15 years ago, people were, as I understand it, very hostile towards the rainbow community here. It has started to soften a bit, as I understand it, since I've been living here, maybe over the past 10, 15 years, it started to soften a bit. But generally, Ticos are quite conservative with stuff like that. You know, it's not Brazil. In Brazil, the rainbow stuff is a lot more accepted. In Costa Rica, it's, I guess you could say, liberalizing slightly, but it's still not something that is widely, accepted by most Costa Ricans. You know, there's a heavy Catholic influence and elements still in Costa Rican society. Danny says, do you think boxing should do away with 4 belts? Ideally, yeah. Should do away with 4 belts. Shout out to Cabell. Is that how you pronounce your name? Cabell. So shout out to you, Hatman. I've been a subscriber for about 2 years, but this is my first comment. I watch almost all of your videos. But shout out to you as well. Paleo says, what about Reform UK, Hatman? I mean, Nigel Farage is a joke. That's it. He's a joke. As Kylie says, Farage isn't a serious politician. He just enjoys being a celebrity. UK politics is in a terrible state. Terrible state, and has been for decades. You know, Farage is not somebody I take seriously. I mean, Farage, back in 2020, just to show you what a joke he is, in 2020, he said that Tony Blair of all people, should come in to deal with the, C-19 thing. I mean, unbelievable. Tony Blair should be in prison for the rest of his life. As if you would trust him to do anything. And Farage, who's supposed to be like, on the opposite side of the political spectrum to Blair, he's like, yeah, we need to bring Blair in. He's the guy that gets things. I mean, unbelievable. Unbelievable. Shout out to President Brush. Thoughts on Tyan Booth? He's an odd man. He said some very questionable things. I thought that a lot of his early stuff, when he was making videos about Coogan and Umar, was quite funny. But since that time when he made the comment about Coogan's daughter, he seems to have lost a lot of support and his videos are not the same again. So that's what I'll say about Tyrone Booth. But he was quite funny in the early days when he was constantly going in on Coogan and Umar. Nothing against Coogan and Umar myself, but the videos he used to make about him were funny. You know? When he was saying, how's your Tuesday going and all that stuff. Talking about bent legs Coogan and yeah, that stuff was funny. Be safe and all that. Shout out to Chili Beef. Have a good one, bro. Yes. If we can all hit the like button, people, it really helps. Much appreciated. Only takes a split second. Helps these streams get seen. Paleo asking what I think about Trump. He's an actor, you know. I don't see him as any kind of savior. Yeah, he's done some things that I think are good. But he's doing an awful lot of other stuff that people are not paying attention to, which are really bad. And Musk, I don't trust him as far as I could throw him. He's going to help bring in technocracy, unfortunately. Now, BL says, do you trim your own hair or have you found a decent barber? I'm bald, bro. I've been bald since the 90s. As in shaving my head since the 90s. That's been my thing. So I don't need a barber. Blue Herring says, good talking to you after a while. What's your thoughts on El Salvador and their leader? I mean, very interesting, right? Locking up all the gangs and making El Salvador much safer than it used to be. Introducing Bitcoin as a currency for the country. You know, done a lot of very, very interesting things. I haven't actually been to El Salvador. But it's interesting what they're doing. Radical stuff. And it's always good when crime can be cut. And yeah, he's definitely cut crime, at least according to the official statistics, in a dramatic way. Because El Salvador used to be one of the most dangerous countries in the world. But he's somehow gone in there and, reduced the crime by a huge amount. Kind of like Giuliani. I know a lot of people didn't like Giuliani and this, that, and the other. But when Giuliani became mayor of New York, I'm not saying he was the sole reason that crime plummeted in New York, but he definitely had a hand in it. During Giuliani's time as New York mayor, they reduced the murder rate in New York by something like, I don't know what it was. But at the start of the 90s, 2,500 murders a year. By the end of the 90s, maybe 600 murders a year. So you do the maths. It was an enormous amount that Giuliani cut the murder rate in New York by. Massive amount. And what they've done in El Salvador is similar to that. Enormous reduction in the murders and what have you. Huge. Do I invest in crypto stocks? Yes, I do. Afro Gem says the people in El Salvador got tired of that lifestyle. Danny says, who has the most sinister eyes? People assume psychos don't know right from wrong. I disagree. Bundy knew exactly what he was doing. Now, of course they know right from wrong. They know right from wrong as a principle. You know, they know what right and wrong means in principle. They just don't care, because they don't have a conscience. They don't have the ability to empathize. So they're aware of, certain actions are seen as wrong. And other people are going to say these actions are terrible, they're evil, and so on and so on. They're well aware of all that. But they don't care. They see us normal people having a conscience as us being weak. That's the way they perceive it. Yeah, they think we're all weak because we've got a conscience. They think we're silly and stupid for feeling things like remorse. They see that as like a ball and chain around our ankle that just prevents us from living our best life. This is how psychopaths view these things. But they know the difference between right and wrong. They know how we perceive things to be right and wrong. They just don't care about our morals and whatnot. Oh, yeah, says should people go all in on Bitcoin during this dip? Well, I am no expert on crypto, Bitcoin, stocks and shares. I talk to people who are far more well-informed and far more clued up than me in my Element group. Shout out to Solomon. Yeah, he's somebody who I go to for crypto advice. And Dwyer, actually. Dwyer has given several tips with regards to stocks, shares, precious metals and whatnot on one of his channels over the years, which I've heeded advice and made quite a bit of money off advice that Dwyer's given. I find his financial advice, although he always does the disclaimer, this should not be construed as financial advice. I've found his financial advice and his financial videos are far better than his boxing videos. And I like his boxing videos, but some of the stuff he says is wild, right? But when it comes to his financial advice, in my experience, he's been absolutely bang on. Totally bang on. And I've taken his advice on several, things, stocks and shares and whatnot, and I made money. So I haven't gone wrong following his advice so far. Financial advice, that is. Investment advice. But shout out to Danny for the super chat. Shout out to President Brush for a super chat. He says, are you familiar with Barbershop Conversations? Yeah, it's not a channel that I watch, but I do know who that is. Didn't Barbershop Conversations have some kind of altercation with Sean Porter's dad back in the days? I seem to remember there was some kind of issue. A shout out to Striker for the super chat. It says, how do we join the Element group? Hatman would love to check it out. Well, it's a chat group that is accessible to members of my Patreon. Panther says, whose advice? Dwyer. D-W-Y-E-R, Dwyer. Richard Dwyer, Esquire. He's a lawyer who does boxing videos. He's most known for his boxing videos. But he also has another channel where he talks about like criminal cases because, again, he is a lawyer. And he does videos about investing as well in crypto, stocks, shares, precious metals, and so on. Osaka Castle says, what type of music do you enjoy, Hatman? All sorts. A plethora of different genres. My music taste is very eclectic, extremely eclectic. So all sorts of music. Charles B says, Hatman, have you been fishing in Costa Rica? Yes, a few times. And fishing in Costa Rica is good. Particularly if you go out on a boat, game fishing is very, very good. You don't even have to go out that far. Danny says, Hatman, John Fury has got to be a psychopath. Possibly. He definitely has some of the psychopathic traits, but possibly he could be a psychopath. Yeah, he could be. It's possible. The Celtic Magician says, Fury is too emotional to be a psychopath, I think. Well, no, some psychopaths are emotional and impulsive and, they have crazy rages and stuff like that. Psychopaths are not all completely the same, but they have certain character traits and personality nuances that qualify them as psychopaths. And the main one, of course, that bonds them all is a lack of empathy. An inability. He's certainly, at the very least, John Fury, a pretty extreme narcissist. Yeah, if he's not quite a psychopath, he's definitely a pretty malignant narcissist. That is for sure. Osaka Castle says, do you like progressive rock, jazz fusion, or like metal? In the 80s, there was, I guess, various popular, rock tracks that I liked and whatnot. Like some AC/DC songs and Guns N' Roses. Some of their popular songs were catchy and I liked them. I was never deeply into their music, but yeah, AC/DC, Back in Black and what have you. And various 80s cheesy, what do they call it now? I'm not sure which subgenre of rock they called it that was popular in the 80s. But I liked a lot of that stuff. A lot of the 80s rock in American movies and whatnot, King6944 says, have any 50-year-old women tried it with you lately? Not lately, thank God. Charles B says, I went fishing not long ago, caught 22 carp. You should be in a fishing competition. Doesn't Barry Hearn do fishing competitions? With big prizes and stuff like that? Man caught 22 carp. Cass says, who's your favorite boxing dad? My favorite boxing dad would be Angel Garcia. Just for jokes, Angel Garcia. I'm not endorsing him as a human being or all the things he said, but I'm just telling you for entertainment value, Angel Garcia had me creasing, mate. Back when his son Danny was still unbeaten? Yeah. Angel Garcia. Oh my gosh. The famous Yeah, I Love the Strippers interview that he did with the boxing voice. Yeah, I Love the Strippers. And they turned that into a song as well that was hilarious. Yeah, I love the strippers. Yeah, I love the strippers. Great times. Shout out to Daddy again for the super chat. He says, John uses phrases like, I've never told a lie in my life. I don't swear, and proceeds to do so. Who do you think is a psychopath in boxing? Well, Don King, definitely. I've seen enough of Don King over the years and know enough about him and his background and his dealings with people to be pretty sure that Don King is a psychopath. And maybe that guy, was he called James Butler, who killed Max Kellerman's brother? He was probably a psychopath. But I don't like throwing the word psychopath around willy-nilly. I think it's, irresponsible to do that. Because there are lots of people who are, unpleasant human beings that are not necessarily psychopaths. Psychopath is a very specific thing. So I don't like just throwing it around, throwing that label around liberally. But Don King, I've seen enough of him to say, yeah, the guy's a psychopath. Shout out to Funny Faces for the super chat. He says, if you had to, would you rather spend a week with Deontay Wilder or a day with A Fury fanboy. Talk about being stuck between a rock and a hard place. Dear, oh dear, oh dear. A week with Wilder or a day with a Fury fanboy. God, that's a tough one, mate. I go with a week with Wilder. Yeah, I go with a week with Wilder because at least a week with Wilder might be funny. Unintentionally so. You know, this country bumpkin, uncouth individual, you might be able to laugh under your breath all the way through the week. But a Fury fanboy, you just want to chin him. So, yeah, I go with Deontay Wilder for a week. It's a good question. A funny question. Alexander says, New Romantics music groups like, yeah, I like Tears for Fears. Yeah, I liked a lot of the pop music that came out in the 80s. Tears for Fears, what's that song called now? Head Over Heels. I like that song. Everybody Wants to Rule the World. The Vanilla Tech said psychopaths rise to the top of certain circles because they lack empathy, indeed, because they're willing to do things that we are not. Yeah, that gives them an advantage. Because the fact we have a conscience prevents us from doing certain things and making certain moves. In business or in our personal lives, we're like, oh, no, I couldn't do that because a psychopath doesn't have that fail-safe mechanism in them. They don't have a conscience. You know? They don't have a conscience. And also psychopaths tend to have a higher risk tolerance than normal people do. And that also allows them to be successful in business, for example. The ones who are intelligent, they can be more successful in business because they're more willing to take risks. And they have no compunction about screwing other people over in business, fleecing people for money, misleading people. And with this, they're able to get a leg up in the corporate world, in the business world, in politics, and so on. And a good movie that depicts this is Nightcrawler, starring Jake Gyllenhaal. That depicts a psychopath in the media and the way that a psychopath in the media behaves. He's like a psychopathic news reporter, basically, a psychopathic journalist. Dominic says, I think Usyk is a psychopath. Based on what? I've never seen him do anything psychopathic at all. Not sure what you're basing that on. AJ says, Angel was talking wild about Amir Khan. Yeah, at that press conference ahead of his fight with his son, Danny Garcia, he said that Khan was wearing, afterwards he said Khan was wearing high heels. At the press conference, he was doing an Amir Khan impression, like jumping up and down, and the Angel was wild. That was hilarious. Charles B says, have you seen any David Lynch movies? I'm not sure. I've heard of the name David Lynch, the director, but I'm not sure. I maybe have seen some of his movies. If you tell me the names of some of his more well-known ones, I'll be able to, say whether I've seen them or not. A shout out to GMS Nightmare. For the super chat, he says, please predict Andre Ward versus Roy Jones Jr., AJ versus Hrgovic. Oh, got loads here. AJ Hrgovic, Bakoli Ruiz, Fury Dubois, Fisher White. I got Roy Jones beating Ward. I got, right now, Hrgovic beating AJ. A few years ago, I might have picked AJ, but right now I've got Hrgovic beating AJ. Bakoli Ruiz. I'm going to go Bakoli. If he's not damaged from the Parker debacle, I'll go Bakoli in that one. Because Ruiz seems to be not in love with boxing anymore. I mean, His performance against Miller was poor. I know he injured his hand and whatnot, but yeah, Ruiz seems to be far more interested in stuff outside of boxing. Fisher against Dillian Whyte. Dillian Whyte should win, but his chin is so dodgy that Fisher actually has a legit chance. Do you know what I mean? Like, Dillian Whyte's got way more skills and experience and savvy, and not that Dillian Whyte's got a great defense, but his defense is better than Johnny Fisher's defense. I mean, compare Dillian Whyte's performance against Dave Allen all those years ago to Fisher's performance. Dillian Whyte handled Dave Allen with ease. I mean, he didn't stop him. I think it did go the distance, didn't it? Or did he stop him late? Or did it go the distance? I think it went the distance. But anyway, Dillian Whyte handled him comfortably, whereas Fisher went life and death. So, but obviously this is a very damaged version of Dillian Whyte that exists today. So he should win, but I wouldn't be that confident because of that chin or lack thereof with Dillian Whyte. Shout out to BL. Thank you for locking in. Big up, big up. Danny says, is AJ the weirdest boxer right now? Yeah, he probably is. He probably is. AJ is a very weird character. CPB1 says, do you view Chris Benoit as a psychopath? That's an interesting question. Let me come back to that in a second and just answer June Sports' super chat first. He says, would AJ be the greatest ever if he was given Chris Eubank Sr.'s spirit? No. AJ would need a lot more than Chris Eubank Sr.'s spirit to be the greatest ever, in my opinion. I definitely think AJ is the weirdest boxer right now. But getting to CPB, Chris Benoit, a psychopath. See, the thing about Chris Benoit is, as with so many of the wrestlers, he was taking loads of steroids. And steroids do change your behavior. Oh, yes, they do. Roid rage is a real thing. I don't care what nobody says. There's actually a guy on YouTube. Some of you guys may have seen him. He's like a bodybuilder, and he is, he's got loads of qualifications in the field of the human anatomy and whatnot, right? He's called Mike Israel, yeah? So he's got like the word Israel in his word. He is a Jewish guy, big steroid head. He's quite funny actually in his videos. And he takes steroids, as I say, and he's gone into it many times in many of his videos that roid rage absolutely is a real thing. And my experience being around people on roids is that it definitely is a thing, okay? It affects the behavior. Obviously, it varies from person to person in terms of how much it'll affect them, how aggressive it will make them, and so on and so forth. But some of these pro wrestlers, I mean, the amount of steroids they must have been taking. And when you're taking all them steroids and it's affecting your personality and behavior, you might become more psychopathic, you know? So there may be people who, without roids, are not psychopaths, but when they take roids, because of the way that it changes their brain chemistry, it actually tips them over the edge and makes them psychopaths, you know? So perhaps with Chris Benoit, that could be the case, that he maybe isn't a natural psychopath, or wasn't, because he's obviously long dead, but it might be the case that he wasn't a natural psychopath, but the roids made him so. And I know that they tried, after the horrible situation that happened with Benoit, they tried to make out as though, oh no, it wasn't because of the roids. Like, no, I think it was. I think the roids had a lot to do with what happened with him. I think it had a lot to do with what happened. CPB saying he had CTE as well from concussions. Yeah, it was maybe like, I don't want to say the perfect storm, but an imperfect. It was a number of different factors which led to him doing what he did. But I definitely think the roids were a major factor in it. Not saying they were the only factor, but I think they were a major factor. Jimmy Gibbs says, roids plus CTE plus family situation. Indeed. Danny says, correlation between test levels and psychopathy. Apparently there is. Apparently even with female psychopaths, they tend to have elevated testosterone levels. Shout out to GMS Nightmare for the super chat. He says, how far would you have gone as a pro boxer if you had the best coach, Hearn as your promoter, access to the best gym, and unlimited cash for camps? Well, people have asked me this over the years, and the problem with answering is that, like every other man, and particularly a big strong man who has had plenty of fights in and out of the ring, I have an ego, and my ego would like to say that I would have gone on to become world champion. Do you know what I mean? But egos can make you delusional, you know? So I could go ahead and say, yeah, I think I would go all the way, but maybe I'm delusional in thinking that. Maybe it's my ego playing tricks on me. You see what I'm saying? So I want to be upfront about that. But in my mind, in my imagination, I could have gone all the way. But maybe I'm totally delusional. I'm open, very much open to that possibility as well. All right, somebody saying I missed a bunch of comments about, where's it gone now? Okay, about David Lynch movies. Shout out to Charles B, because he mentioned David Lynch movies. I may have missed those comments. I didn't mean to, but, you know, when I get into talking and loads of other comments are coming through, I obviously miss a lot of the comments that people are leaving. Let me try and find where people have mentioned David Lynch movies. Okay, Charles B says Mulholland Drive, Blue Velvet, Elephant Man. I don't think I've seen any of those, you know. Don't think I've seen any of those films. Oh, June. Did he make the original June? Because the original June was terrible. You know, I like 80s movies, and even some of the terrible movies in the 80s I liked, but the original June was a shocker. God, that film was awful. I'm amazed it got a cult following because it was so bad. That film was terrible. That's one of the occasions where the remake is much better than the original. You know, the new version of June is way better than the 80s version. Good God. Now, Alexander says, Hatman, why is Gangs of New York your favorite movie? Well, I didn't say it's my favorite movie. I said it's one of my favorite movies. And the reason, shout out to Osaka Castle, big up. The reason it is one of my favorite movies, number of reasons. The acting is fantastic. It's got a great, compelling story. I love the sets and the costumes of the period. It's loosely based on real characters and real events whose story hadn't really been told before. You know, Bill the Butcher in the movie, he's called Bill Cutting. In real life, he was based upon a individual called Bill Poole. And he was actually kind of an amalgam, you know. Daniel Day-Lewis's character was partly based on Bill Poole, but also based on some other underworld figures and whatnot in America in the 1800s. But yeah, just a whole heap of different reasons why I like it. Great script, great acting, loads of memorable lines and memorable scenes, and definitely one of Daniel Day-Lewis's best ever performances. He acted out of his skin. I thought Leo DiCaprio was great. I thought Cameron Diaz was great. Brendan Gleeson was great. It was just fantastic all round. It's one of the films that I just never get sick of watching. I've lost count of how many times I've seen Gangs of New York. Over and over again. It's a brilliant film. I even like the music and the soundtrack. In fact, it was scored by the same guy who scored Lord of the Rings. I forget the guy's name, but the guy who did the score for Lord of the Rings, he also did the score for Gangs of New York. Shout out to Danny for the super chat. He says, would you have a pint with John Fury from the Yard Road? Well, I don't drink, and I wouldn't want to be around John Fury. The man's an idiot. Nobody wants to be around John Fury, right? He's so flipping toxic, and I don't like using that word because, you know, it's been weaponized by the left. But, yeah, John Fury is so toxic. Nobody likes being around him. His own sons don't even like being around him. He's insufferable, that man. The Celtic Magician says, Hatman, did you enjoy the first Tobey Maguire Spider-Man? Not really. I'm not into superhero films. The only superhero films I really liked were the Nolan Batman movies. And I guess Infinity War was watchable. And the only reason that I liked Infinity War was because of Thanos, the villain. I didn't like any of the other characters. I only liked Thanos. Charles B says, David Lynch films are very weird and confusing, but brilliantly executed. Ayed says, Molly May hates him apparently. I'm telling you, everyone hates John Fury. I don't think his own kids like him. His brother don't like him. You know, Peter don't like him. Nobody likes the guy. He's flipping awful. I mean, he's occasionally funny to watch from a distance, but to actually know him, nah, you wouldn't want to know him. Man's an idiot. And he's not liked, as I understand it, within the traveling community. Loads of travelers don't like him. Reality's Awakened now says, Hatman, what's your ideal ring walk music? Would Mobb Deep Animal Instinct work? The only rap I would come to the ring to would be MOP. Yeah, something by MOP. It wouldn't be anything Mobb Deep. It would be MOP. But it probably wouldn't be rap at all. It'd probably be like a reggae song or some other kind of song. Afro Jam says, who is the celebrity who you dislike the most? I don't know, man. I don't really pay attention to celebrities like that to be thinking about who I dislike the most. I dislike plenty of them, you know. Shout out to Danny. He says, Hatman, how come you dislike the superhero movies but enjoy fairy tale ones like Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones? John would tell some hilarious stories, to be fair. Well, the simple way to answer it is to say that superhero movies feature a bunch of adult children, whereas in fantasy movies like Lord of the Rings, they've actually got adults, not adult children, but actual adults. Yeah, in superhero movies, they're all like man children and women children, you know? They all behave like flipping children. From Spider-Man to Deadpool to Iron Man, they all behave like bloody children. It just doesn't appeal to me at all. They have this infantile way of behaving. Yeah? Whereas in Lord of the Rings, people actually behave like adults. So I find it a lot more engaging. Like, to me, the superhero films, Marvel films, it's just brain rot. That stuff is so unappealing to me. So childish and just popcorn nonsense, It's a sign of the times that so many adults like Marvel movies today. Especially women. Women love Marvel movies. Like, women under 30, they're in love with Marvel movies. It tells you something about their mentality and their maturity level. That they love them kind of movies so much. CPB1 says, Hatman, do you like Star Wars? The originals, yeah. And I liked the third of the prequels, which was The Revenge of the Sith, purely for Palpatine. there was nothing else I really liked about Revenge of the Sith other than Palpatine. Palpatine was an iconic villain. Charles B says Palpatine is the GOAT. He is. Absolutely hilarious. See, people are dropping the lines. Yep. Not from a Jedi. Do it. Unlimited power. Seriously, we start doing Palpatine lines, I'm just going to be laughing the whole time. Oh my days. That performance was so damn funny. It's ridiculous. The bit where he goes, I love democracy. I love the Republic. That's so scarily real in terms of how real life politicians behave. When they're coming out with all this stuff about how much they love democracy and all that, and they're doing the opposite. Dear, oh dear. I love democracy. I love the Republic. Have I ever told you the tale of Darth Plagueis the Wise? Shout out to President Brush. He says, big up Hatman. What's the biggest regret of your 20s? Biggest regret of my 20s. Biggest regret of my 20s. I don't really have many regrets from my 20s, because I wasn't really doing people dirty or anything like that in my 20s. I was more doing people dirty in my teens. In my 20s, not so much. I was just trying to pursue my ambitions and survive, really, in my 20s. I think I did the best I could under the circumstances, so I wouldn't really say I have many regrets. There might have been a couple of relationships that I stayed in for too long. But other than that, off the top of my head, I can't really think of any major regrets in my 20s, to be honest with you. Yeah, can't really think of anything. But shout out to President Brush. Danny says, what's your favorite fairy tale archetype? Barbarians, wizards, goblins, vampires, werewolves? Probably wizards. Gandalf is great. And Chili Beef earlier on asked for if I've got any like guilty pleasures in terms of movies. Well, I did watch the Harry Potter movies, which are, made for children and stuff like that. But I did like, God, what's the wizard in Harry Potter called again? Dumbledore. I did like Dumbledore. And there's something about that, those old school British theatre actors, when they're really laying it on thick, that is really charming and appealing, like Ian McKellen. There's something about his acting that's like really appealing. When he played in he played Salee Teabing in The Da Vinci Code, he was the best thing about that movie. And the same thing with the guy, he's an Irish guy that plays Dumbledore in in Harry Potter. He's just really enjoyable to watch. And obviously Robbie Coltrane was in, Harry Potter as well. And those old British Isles, right, because they're not all British, some of them are Irish, theatre actors are always very enjoyable on the screen. Richard Harris was one of the Dumbledores, because there was two Dumbledores. Yeah, Charles B says they made Dumbledore gay. Yeah, that's why Fantastic Beasts and all that, not interested. Snape as well, of course. Alan Rickman, he's another one that's great to watch. So they had so many of those like old school, theatre trained British actors, and they're all great. They all had a blast in Harry Potter, and that's what made it interesting. Yeah, Snape was great. A lot of the actors were great in there. The adult actors mainly, right? Adult actors, you know what I mean? The actors who happen to be adults. Shout out to Danny again for the super chat. Kylie says those classically trained British actors are a dying breed. Yeah, they are. They really are, unfortunately. Yeah, Ralph Fiennes as Voldemort, of course. They were all in there. It was like an all-star British theatre legend cast is what it was. And they were fantastic. Gary Oldman. God, how could I forget him? Gary Oldman as Sirius Black. I mean, they literally had so many amazing British actors in Harry Potter. Like, they went in with the casting. How could it not be good with all that acting talent in there, The kids barely had to do anything because they had so much talent around them. Shout out to G-Man in the chat. And who is the Scottish woman? She was good as well. The Scottish woman who was the teacher, yeah, Ayed, I think is referring to her as well. She was fantastic. Yep, Julie Walters was good as Weasley's mum, yep. And even the dad, I forget his name. Another British actor. The acting was fantastic for the old school crew. McGonagall, that was it, yeah. McGonagall. That's her name. Judi Dench. Maggie Smith, excuse me. Maggie Smith. McGonagall, yeah. McGonagall was great. I think she passed away recently, didn't she? Maggie Smith. G-Man says, Harry Potter talk, F Emma Watson, I'll leave it there. CPB says she was in her 90s. Actually, wasn't, what's the crazy Scottish comedian called? What's his name again? I forget his name. Famous. How can I forget his name? What's the name of the famous Scottish comedian? The crazy one. He might be like the most famous Scottish comedian of all time. What is his name? Billy Connolly. Was Billy Connolly in Harry Potter at any point? I don't think he was he? I think Billy Connolly was. He wasn't, but I think he should have been. They would have had a role for him in there somewhere. I liked Billy Connolly. He had a very small role in a series of unfortunate events. And that, to me, was one of Jim Carrey's best ever performances. Very underrated. Jim Carrey in a series of unfortunate events was fantastic. AB guy says, Hatman, are you naturally a heavyweight or do you work out to get there? No, naturally. I've been a heavyweight since I was about 14, 15. Jay Hurst says he was in it, just very briefly, as Nicholas Fleming. Was he? Which movie was that? Triple R says the one with the shrunken head on the bus was my favorite. The third with a werewolf, I think it was. And that had Lenny Henry as the shrunken head, right? Obviously just his voice. King says, have you ever watched Top Boy? If so, who's your favorite character? Yeah, the original Top Boy, which is now called Top Boy Summer House. Like the first, it was 2 seasons, wasn't it? The original Top Boy, which they call Summer House now. That one was good. But once Drake got involved in Netflix, it became absolute garbage. So it's only the original one that was good. And, Asher D and Kano's characters were both good. Reality's Awakened now says, Hatman, have you ever had a soulmate level sexual connection but nothing else worked? If so, do you regret leaving the relationship? Well, sex has never been an emotional experience for me ever. It's always been completely a physical thing. So I've been in relationships with, women who I've had feelings for and loved. But the sexual act was never anything emotional for me, even with them. So, soulmate level sexual connection is not an experience I understand. But the best I've ever had with a girl was somebody who I didn't even like. It was, the physical aspect was amazing, but there was no emotional connection to her whatsoever. The Celtic Magician says, I have had a soulmate sexual connection and it haunts my mind. Yeah, it's not something I've ever had. Not something I've ever had. It's always been purely physical for me. All that stuff, sexual stuff, is always just purely physical. Joey says, Hatman, have you seen Equilibrium? Yes, I have. Might have seen it once. I vaguely remember it. It's got Christian Bale in it, right? Am I looking forward to GTA 6? Not really. Do I like Call of Duty? I liked COD 4, Modern Warfare 2, and Black Ops 2. Didn't really like Black Ops 1. A lot of people love it, but me personally, I didn't really like it. I preferred Black Ops 2. And as I say, I like Black Ops 1 Zombies, but in terms of the multiplayer, I didn't really like it. Preferred Black Ops 2, and as I say, Modern Warfare 2 and the original COD 4. And, the original Modern Warfare 2 as well. I'm talking about Modern Warfare 2 2009 and COD 4 2007. Now, I didn't like Modern Warfare 3 at all. DTCM says, Legend of Stinkmeaner. Indeed, that was my old gamer tag. Yes, the Legend of Stinkmeaner. And that name comes from the adult animated TV series, The Boondocks. Indeed, if you know, you know. What about World at War? I didn't really play World at War much, to be honest. I only played it a couple times, so I never really got into it. And the first time I played World at War was about a month before Modern Warfare 2 came out. And Modern Warfare 2 just eclipsed everything, so. That was the first COD game that I really got into, Modern Warfare 2. After playing Modern Warfare 2, that's when I got into COD 4. It was after Modern Warfare 2. Am I into anime? Not at all, no. Black Dynamite says, Aaron Magruder turned out to be a massive sheep when that 2020 thing happened. Yeah, a lot of people did. Afro Jam says, do you remember PS2 COD games? No, never played them. Did I try Warzone? Yeah, I've tried Warzone and various COD games, and it's never really my thing. Now, who have I got out of Parker and Fury in their current form? Fury. I can't see Parker really setting about Fury like he would need to in order to win. I think he's too much in love with him. Afro Jam says Splinter Cell and Hitman games were cool. I may have played Splinter Cell way back in the days. But all those games, to me anyway, and I don't know when the first Splinter Cell came out, but I remember when I played some of them, I just was thinking that these are like knockoffs of Metal Gear Solid. Because I was completely taken by the first Metal Gear Solid game. Did I ever play Mass Effect? Yeah, but I was never really, not really into like RPGs. Have I seen Old Boy? No, I've never seen it. The Korean film, right? Never seen it. Have I played Black Ops 6? Nah. I checked out a Call of Duty. What age did I hit my prime in boxing? It's really hard to say, because I stopped boxing in my mid to late 20s is when I stopped actually competing. Maybe mid 20s. How old was I at that time? 26, 27? But I feel as though my prime might have been a lot later than that. Might have even been in my mid 30s. Because I got in really good shape in my mid 30s and at one point in my late 30s. And I felt better than ever. But then I wasn't sparring, so you never know, you know? Striker said, Metal Gear Solid, what a revolutionary game that was. You had to be there to understand how it changed everything. Yeah, it blew my mind. When I played that first Metal Gear Solid game, it was like, wow, this is an experience that I always wanted to have without realizing I wanted to have it, if that makes sense. Do you know what I mean? Like, playing that game was just incredible to me. Will I purchase GTA 6? No, I doubt it. Do I still write lyrics? Very occasionally. And it takes me a long time these days to, finish a song. Very long time. When I was young, in my 20s, lyrics would come to me a lot more frequently. And it tends to be like that with most, singer-songwriters and artists in general. You tend to get most of your creativity when you're young. And as you get older, the creativity slows down. Barry says, that's crazy, thought everyone would buy. Not sure why you thought that. Like the two most, I guess you could say, casual games in gaming are Call of Duty and GTA. And I would describe myself as kind of a casual game. I mean, I really don't play any video games anymore. But even when I was still playing fairly regularly, I would describe myself as a relatively casual gamer. I mean, there's levels, right? But I was never so casual that I was like obsessed with GTA and COD every year. You know what I mean? I was never that level of casual. Yeah, FIFA as well is another one. People that buy FIFA every year and stuff like that. I never got that obsessed about those games. King says, thoughts on GTA 5? I thought it was, it was okay. Nothing special. From a technical perspective, I thought GTA 5 was impressive. The size of the world and the graphics for an open world game were fantastic. But I didn't find it very compelling. You know, he was alright. I didn't find the characters particularly interesting. Franklin, who's the ex-gangster? Was it Mike? And then the crazy one that lives in the desert with all the crystal meth. It was just, Barry Ryan says, did you play Red Dead 2? Yeah, Red Dead 2 was pretty good. I like that a lot better than GTA. It still wasn't amazing to me, Red Dead 2, but it was pretty good. Trevor, yeah, he's the one. The crystal meth crazy one out in the desert. And I think, for me, the style of writing that Rockstar have in the GTA games is kind of dated now. You know, the types of characters they have and the style of writing is no longer impressive to me. They've been superseded by many other developers who do, you know, writing way better. It's like they're still using the formula from the early 2000s with the characters and the writing. They haven't updated in that regard. They've updated as far as, you know, the graphics and the game engine and the size of the world and, you know, the size of the map and all that. And even some of the game mechanics. But when it comes to the characters, like I say, to me, it's a bit dated. Well, very dated. The characters and the story and whatnot. Am I disappointed with the Undisputed game? Have you played? No, I've not played. I'm not interested. I don't like boxing games. Did I play any Star Wars games? Yeah, dabbled a little bit with the Star Wars Battlefront games, but didn't really get into them. But did, you know, have a go at both. As Joey said there, GTA is a money-spinning machine. It is indeed. I mean, the way that they flogged the dead horse that is GTA 5 for like 3 generations, right? GTA 5 came out on PS3, correct me if I'm wrong. It came out on PS3. They remastered it for PS4, and I swear they remastered it for PS5 as well. That's correct, isn't it? They literally rinsed that game for 3 flipping generations. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Never played Skyrim. I know a lot of people liked it, but I never played it. All right, very weird comment there from Cass. I hope you're talking about a video game. Not sure what that comment's about. Afro Jam says Skyrim is a husk of a husk of a husk. Striker said I started with the Atari 2600, as did I. That was my first console. The Atari 2600, the joystick with one button. Charles B says they dropped a leak for the new Elder Scrolls. It just looked like Skyrim. Would I have any interest in John Jones versus Tom Aspinall? I'm a casual MMA guy. I tune in from time to time. I don't really follow any one fighter particularly closely. But I guess I'd watch it, Ron Lyle versus Michael Moorer, prime for prime, who wins? It's a good fight. It's either going to be Lyle by knockout or Moorer on points. I might go Moorer on points, but not with much confidence because Moorer's chin was terrible. Nah, I never liked racing games. Never really been into cars like that, I've never been a car man. I mean, I've always owned cars or owned cars for many years, but I've never been like what do they call it? A motorhead, or what do they call car enthusiasts? I've never been someone that's really big on, fast cars and all that type of stuff. Never really interested me. June Sports says, why do you hate boxing games? Because they're clunky. Fight Night and most boxing games are extremely clunky, and it doesn't even come close to recreating the enjoyment I got from doing actual boxing in real life and the feeling of doing actual boxing. The fluidity of real boxing is very rarely replicated in boxing games. Yeah. Fight Night and all these other boxing games are so robotic. It's horrible. Charles B says, did you grow up supporting a football team? No, not really. No. I was that guy who... I used to watch football really just for the banter at school. When someone's team lost, ribbing them over the team losing and talking football at school. But I was never really into it. I was always the boxing guy. So yeah, never really been into football like that. But in the 90s, I did watch it. As I say, more so for the banter. So, the only thing I really know about football is from the 1990s. When Man United were dominating, they had obviously Alex Ferguson, the hairdryer, and they had that team with Ryan Giggs and Paul Scholes and Peter Schmeichel, Gary and Phil Neville, etc., etc. Liverpool had, Steve McManaman, Robbie Fowler. You had, obviously there were many different teams with Man United, but at one point you had Dwight York and Andy Cole. Matt Letizia for Southampton. There was Tony Yeboah, played at Leeds. I'm just mentioning random footballers I remember from back in the 90s. David Ginola at Newcastle with, God, who else was at Newcastle? Alan Shearer, obviously. Shearer and Sheringham. Shearer and Sheringham, the SAS. Yeah, of course, Arsenal, indeed. With Ian Wright. Kylie says 90s football was a golden age. Yeah, Andy Cole was at Newcastle. Yeah, he was at Newcastle before he ended up at Man United. He was at Newcastle. He didn't do too well at Newcastle from what I remember. And they also had a black Colombian guy at Newcastle called Faustino Asprilla. You guys remember him? He was such a weird player. He used to fall over and trip over his own feet all the time. He was like one of the clumsiest footballers I've ever seen. And he was a striker. And occasionally he would score an incredible goal. But most of the time he was tripping over his own feet. Dwight York ended up at Villa. Yeah, I remember that. Carlton Palmer at Leeds, yep. Carlton Palmer. And if you go back to the 80s, obviously there was John Barnes, Ian Rush with his mustache. Gary Lineker. Gary Lineker was like the king of toe punting, toe punt goals from like 2 yards out. So Lineker was always scoring goals from 2 yards out. Shout out to Don't Watch. He says, been a subscriber since 2013. Big up your channel and big up yourself, sir. Yeah, 90s football. Goal of the month and all that. Poacher, yeah, goal poacher. Alan Hansen was, always complaining about terrible defense. The defense was shocking, terrible. That's all he used to say, like every time he would do the analysis. The defending was just shocking, terrible. And John Motson was a great commentator. He's got to be the GOAT, John Motson. With a sheepskin coat on and that. Yeah, I remember David Baddiel. Yeah, with the Jason Lee thing, pineapple on his head. Yeah, I remember all that. What was that show called with Skinner? Was it called Skinner and Baddiel? Or there was another name for it? Because there was a show called Skinner and Baddiel, but the football one, I think, was called something else. When they had Stato, who did all the statistics, the guy that wore the dressing gown. What was that show called? Oh yeah, Roy Keane, of course, at Man U. Yep. Soccer AM? No, it's not Soccer AM. Oh, okay, you're talking about them guys getting sacked from Soccer AM. But what was the show called with Skinner and Baddiel? The original show. It was called Football Something. And they were still doing that show when they recorded Football's Coming Home. I'm actually going to have to look it up now. This is going to bother me. Let me look up Skinner. All right, let's have a look. Career. All right, where are we at? Fantasy Football League, that's the one. Fantasy Football League was the show. Yeah, that show was actually funny. Fantasy Football League. Yeah, Kylie mentioned it there, fantasy football. Shout out to Ocean Blue in the chat, just locked in. Shout out to Cal. He says, Undisputed is like playing as Joe Joyce on heroin. Not good then. Undisputed feels like boxing underwater. Somebody asking me, did I have conflict with Dylan White? Never. Bored people on the internet invented that thing about me and Dylan White having conflict. Never had conflict with him in my life. Paul Parker, QPR in the house. Paul Ince. Paul Ince actually grew up with Nigel Ben. And believe it or not, when they were growing up together, Paul Ince was like the harder one of the two. Yeah. Paul Ince was supposed to be like the harder guy out of Pause, but you know what I mean. In terms of fighting and on the streets, Paul Ince was apparently like the harder one than Nigel Ben. Go figure, right? So here there was Paul Ince and Coppen says, didn't Dylan mention you one time? Yeah, he did in an interview, yeah. And I've spoken to him like on in DMs on Twitter. Spoke to him a couple times. Yeah, Italian football was good back in the 90s. Serie A. They used to show that on Channel 4. All right, peeps, gonna draw the curtain on this one. How long have I been talking for? 3 hours? Gotta be 3 hours now, innit? So I've been talking for 3 hours. Yeah, over 3.5 hours. Wow, it flies. Thanks to you guys. Conversation's been great. Hopefully you've enjoyed it too. And a special shout out to everyone who donated via Super Chat. Be good. Take care. I'll catch you guys on the next one. And if I don't do another live this weekend, then make sure you have a good one. All right? Yeah. Until next time.